Warning, the following video is using integral language and distinctions. I will try to explain as I go, but to some extent it is assuming that you are integrally informed or have some knowledge of integral theory already. If you do not, you can find intro material on my IErM David Long YouTube page. Hey, how you doing? I am David Long. I'm here to talk to you today about a talk I went to recently. It was Steve McIntosh and his book, The Presence of the Infinite. He was given a short 45-minute talk and then did like a Q&A at the end. And I was lucky enough to be able to ask a question, so I was super happy about that. I'm going to go ahead and post that talk right here for your viewing pleasure. I also got a chance to go up and talk to him a little bit at the end. I wish we would have got more time. He seemed like a real nice guy. One of the things I also really respected about what he said was,
the best part of tonight will be the interaction, the questions and discussion that we have. And not just questions, but objections or comments.
I really like the idea of embracing a critical approach, being interested, as he says, in expanding our ideas of the truth so that way we can be more good and that we can have more solidarity as a group.
And one of the promises of improving our spirituality, making it truer by better integrating it with science and reason, and also including the best of what's come before, is that it has the promise of greater spiritual leadership. So much of progressive spirituality is caught up in pseudoscience and magical thinking that at least most scientists wouldn't agree that science and spirituality is being adequately harmonized at the level of progressive spirituality. The promise of evolutionary spirituality is that by creating a more agreeable form of spirituality, by creating an understanding of spirit that's more scientific and more agreeable, it can create greater solidarity in our culture, which would lead to less political polarization. It would lead to a more inspiring educational system. It would lead to better art and music. It would lead to a more moral society that works better for everyone. But with evolutionary spirituality, we're able to more effectively recognize the spiritual truth that can be found within the discoveries of science. And one of the ways that evolutionary spirituality does that is it reclaims the power of philosophy. Philosophy as a bridge between science and spirituality.
So I feel like Steve and I probably resonate a lot around this idea. I am in full agreement with what he's saying here. In that spirit, I want to make this video as an offering to try and help us all grow, be challenged, see if we can find the best semantic and existential framings for things. So that way we can have a type of spirituality that is healthy, life-affirming, and realistic. I think even though I might disagree with some of these other integral brothers and sisters sometimes who might have a more idealistic metaphysics, I think we agree about so much other stuff that in some sense it might really feel like nitpicking. Maybe it doesn't even matter so much. But I think that actually these ideas do matter in a big picture kind of way. And I'll say why. Because I think that's important. Because he and I are the kind of dudes who are excited about embracing the friction. I'll start right in with my question to him and his response. And I think that in itself will be very revealing of my position and his position. And that'll be a good way to sort of open up the dialogue further. Because I was trying to keep it brief, I do include a couple small clips to give more perspective on what I'm saying. Because when you ask a question like that, you sort of have to speak in terminology and kind of hope the other person understands what you're talking about. And he did. He followed what I was saying. He's probably heard the questions a bunch of times. And I'm also going to invite Steve to watch this video. Anyways, let's get to it. Here's the question. Hi, my name's David.
Hi, David.
Good talk.
Thank you, David.
Lots to fit into 45 minutes. I have a couple questions. I'm pretty familiar with integral theory. I've been into that for about 10 years or so. I guess my main questions are around evolution and the transcendent. When it comes to the transcendent and modern cosmology,
It seems like a lot of cosmologists nowadays don't think that the Big Bang was the beginning.
They've concluded that one of the 20th century's greatest scientific ideas might have to be thrown out.
There's certainly not Big Bang. That is impossible. I don't believe in that at all.
Big Bang doesn't quite work. So much so that people are now starting to think that Big Bang wasn't the beginning at all.
How many people think there was something before the Big Bang?
It is a completely different paradigm now. It's the new mathematics which we obtained by the marriage of quantum mechanics and Einstein's gravity. Even if the mathematical laws would not have broken down at this point, even then it's philosophically very incomplete. Like, how can something just originate from nothing?
In Paramsing's scheme, instead of emerging from nothing, our universe owes its existence to a previous one that had the misfortune to collapse in on itself, then, thanks to some clever maths, rebounded to become what we see today. So the Big Bang was not a bang at all. It was rather a big bounce.
It's a surprising thing about the universe, but if we look around, there's lots of cycles always happening. Like this, we have seasons, we have even the motion of planets around sun. Maybe these cycles or the bounces may not be always surprising, and these are just the cycles of weather in a way for the universe, of going through contraction and expansion and contraction and expansion and so on. What I certainly believe in is that Big Bang is just a very small event in this whole history of the universe, and I think that itself is a big paradigm change.
Yes, there was a genesis. Yes, there was a Big Bang, and it happens all the time.
It's inconceivable to me that the universe really started at the Big Bang. Why? Because that would leave so many basic questions unanswered.
Smolin's natural selection idea proposes that for a universe to prosper, it must reproduce. And for that to happen, it must contain black holes that, according to Smolin, spawn offspring universes.
I'm open to almost any philosophical point of view, and I want a theory that's ultimately tested by data and confirmed that this is the way the world works.
It seems like there's been a lot of questions about that ever since the beginning when they were talking about like the red Doppler shift and all that.
There are a few astronomers who doubt that the redshift of distant galaxies is due to the Doppler effect, who are skeptical about the expanding universe and the Big Bang. Perhaps our descendants will regard our present ignorance with as much sympathy as we feel to the ancients for not knowing whether the Earth went around the sun. If the general picture, however, of a Big Bang followed by an expanding universe is correct, what happened before that? The customary answer is that a god or gods created the universe out of nothing. But if we wish to pursue this question courageously, we must, of course, ask the next question. Where did God come from? If we decide that this is an unanswerable question, why not save a step and conclude that the origin of the universe is an unanswerable question? Or, if we say that God always existed, why not save a step and conclude that the universe always existed? There's no need for a creation, it was always here. These are not easy questions. Cosmology brings us face to face with the deepest mysteries, with questions that were once treated only in religion and myth.
I think there's also a lot of problems with language, and like that's where you get into the transrational or the post-formal. But is it possible that the universe is infinite and there is nothing transcendent? Because then that seems like we get into problems of anthropomorphism and infinite regress. And also, I guess, just to do the two, the other one with evolution, it seems like, and I think these two tie together, but if we take a more big picture view and the universe is infinite and we're thinking of ourselves as being like the hands and feet of evolution in the world, I think that's a really good big picture view and it's beautiful poetry, but I also wonder if it's big enough because it seems like the sun's gonna die, you know what I mean? So where is this, we talk about evolution and purpose, and maybe this gets into some kind of balancing the big three. Do we really think that there's some kind of ultimate goal of evolution to where it's going, or is it just to try to create a more healthy and sustainable world in the meantime?
Sure. Well, those are great questions. I appreciate those. Let me answer the first one about cosmology. There's, the multiverse theory is currently fashionable among secular cosmologists. And that's the idea that our universe is one of perhaps infinitely similar universes that have different laws of physics, and that the reason that our laws of physics are particularly situated for life is just like a cosmic lottery. That there's all these other universes and that they're not right for life. We just happen to get lucky in our universe. And I think that's sort of bad theology masquerading as cosmology, because it violates Occam's razor like crazy. But it doesn't really matter whether there's a multiverse, because it's a pretty well-established scientific fact that within our universe, the universe we live in, time itself began 13.8 billion years ago. Even Stephen Hawking, who would love to, erase the implications of the Big Bang, has got mathematical calculations that show time does indeed have a distinct and dramatic beginning. And so regardless of whether the universe goes on infinitely out, it's at least partially finite in the sense that it has a distinct beginning. So the universe we live in, the universe in which evolution is happening, has a primordial emergence that we embody, and that which all forms of emergence rest on since then. And I think for purposes of evolutionary spirituality, we can certainly recognize the science of that and allow for a plurality of conceptions regarding whether our universe is unique or not. From my perspective, from my understanding of evolutionary spirituality, I think of the universe as being infinite indeed. The existential being of the universe is indeed infinite, but that in our universe and maybe trillions of other universes, there's a partial removal of the infinite from a clearing, if you will. That sort of time creates a clearing in which freedom can unfold. So the problem of a first cause, for example, we mentioned that in infinite regress. Right? So we said, okay, well, there was the infinite, and then it somehow gave rise to the finite within itself, transcendent and infinite, if we believe that. But then what caused that? Right? It just goes back, and that keeps pushing the problem back. But philosophically, the idea of an uncaused cause is exactly that. It sort of ends the infinite regress to say that the infinite gave rise to the finite, but nothing gave rise to the infinite because it's existentially, its being always has been and always will be, even though we exist in time and had a distinct beginning. So we could certainly argue about that. I don't claim to have any special knowledge about what the truth of that is. But I do know that the Big Bang's real. It's a scientific fact, and time began, and so the rest is somewhat superfluous for our understanding of evolutionary spirituality. Nice to speculate about. Remind me of the second part of your question?
The second part was about evolutionary spirituality seems to be taking a big picture kind of view, but is it big enough?
Right, sure. Well, one of the founders of integral philosophy, and certainly one of the patron saints of evolutionary spirituality, is Pierre Desjardins, right? And he had a famous concept of the omega point, right, where the potentials of evolution are exhausted, and the universe, in a sense, completes itself. Now that's, cosmological speculation, and I think it's interesting and worthy. I think that something more has come from something less. That as I argue carefully in Evolution's Purpose, my 2012 book, there is a clear teleology in the universe. There is progress in value and process philosophy. It's not just recognized in integral philosophy. So I've got the arguments there that are too didactic to roll out, in an answer to your question. But I definitely argue and believe that the universe is going somewhere, and where it's going is increasingly toward the infinite. In other words, the removal of perfection from the finite realm is gradually being brought back in as we make progress in value, as we move toward the beautiful, the true, and the good, despite the regresses and the stagnations and the potentials for catastrophic ends to humanity. In the meantime, we're trying to make the world a better place and evolve ourselves as well. Evolution occurs in the realms of self, culture, and nature. So it's not just nature that's evolving, it's human history and indeed ourself, our consciousness. So I think evolution is going somewhere. I think that eventually, this is kind of my belief system. It's not a specific teaching of evolutionary spirituality, but I personally believe that there will be a completion of evolution and that perfection will be achieved. Evolutionary potentials will be exhausted, and in a sense, humans and spiritual beings as ascenders in time will transcend to another universe age. That's getting pretty woo-woo, but I do think that there is a potential endpoint to evolution, just because there is perfection. And that I think perfection can be achieved, and I think that in our spiritual growth, in the afterlife, again, this is a belief system, but that we will eventually transcend time, transcend the finite universe in our spiritual ascension. But that's, again, I have to bracket that a little bit. In terms of the heat death of the sun, or the predictions of the end of the universe, all I can say about that is that I think that the project of free will creatures discovering perfection by their own lights and gradually participating in the project of perfecting the universe, that will continue, and when that project is complete, then what happens to the stars won't matter as much. But I don't know whether that's a satisfactory answer, which is to stab. Okay.
Who else has a question?
Yeah.
Is it possible that the universe is infinite and there is nothing transcendent?
There is perfection. perfection can be achieved, the universe, in a sense, completes itself.
Problems of anthropomorphism and infinite regress. Do we really think that there's some kind of ultimate goal of evolution to where it's going, or is it just to try to create a more healthy and sustainable world in the meantime?
I definitely argue and believe that the universe is going somewhere, and where it's going is increasingly toward the infinite. In other words, that there will be a completion of evolution. Perfection will be achieved, evolutionary potentials will be exhausted, free will creatures discovering perfection by their own lights and gradually participating in the project of perfecting the universe and the afterlife. We will eventually transcend time, transcend the finite universe in our spiritual ascension. Humans and spiritual beings as ascenders in time will transcend to another universe age. And that's getting pretty woo-woo. Now that's cosmological speculation. I don't claim to have any special knowledge about what the truth of that is. This is kind of my belief system. It's not a specific teaching of evolutionary spirituality, but again, this is a belief system. I have to bracket that a little bit. I don't know whether that's a satisfactory answer, which needs to stab. Okay.
Who else has a question?
Yeah. In the meantime, we're trying to make the world a better place and evolve ourselves as well.
Yeah, I would imagine that for many of you, that's probably enough said. You probably can see that there's tons of problems with that. But for those of you who might agree with him or have some of these similar positions, I'm going to explain in detail the issues that I take with this perspective. Whew. Wow, so much to say. I want to talk about his response to my argument and delve deeper into his perspective. We'll talk about other things that he said in his talk, and we'll try to really figure out his perspective, what he's saying, what his answer is, and then we'll critique it. Okay, so first things first. Basically, what I asked him was, how do you know that there is anything that is transcendent? All the ideas I've heard about that get into this infinite regress. How do we know that reality, the universe, as we know it, is not what is infinite? Why does there need to be a transcendent source of all that is?
Something is ultimate. The totality exists necessarily. And so the question is, what is ultimate? For secular spirituality, the ultimate is merely the physical totality of matter and energy.
The whole point of his talk is to advocate for the love of a creator God.
This is the idea of the love of God. We claim the idea of God as this loving creator that lives within us and that knows us. The love of God, a source of reality which can love and be loved.
When we experience beauty or whatever, we're experiencing the love of a creator who cares about us.
The beautiful, the true, and the good are each little flashing expressions of perfection, or the infinite, as messages of love. They're bringing a spiritual message from divinity directly to us, and when we tune ourselves through spiritual philosophy to understand and hear these messages of love, they really come in loud and clear.
So basically, it is a form of creationism, and he basically is an apologist. He basically is using some form of Christian ideas and Christian cosmology and trying to sell that as a valid form of evolutionary spirituality. That's part of even why he dresses and looks like a priest, I think. So when you hear him say the word the infinite, just think in your mind, he's talking about God.
Christianity recognizes God as infinite.
When he says that he clears a space,
there's a partial removal of the infinite from a clearing.
He's talking about creation.
And at the heart or the depth of this realm is the spiritual experience of the love of the Creator for each creature. That the love of God is the thrilling experience of being known and cared for as an individual by the source of the universe is a thrilling confirmation of the faith of those who have a personal relationship with God, this creative being, which has, will and love.
This creator God sees me, Jeff, and loves me, Jeff.
That's what the experience of the love of God confirms.
And you know who that God is? It's you. All of the symbols in mythology refer to you. You can get stuck out there and think it's all out there. Have you been reborn? Have you died to your animal nature and come to life as a human incarnation?
Don't worry, Joe. You're going to have plenty of time to talk about this.
But hey, Don't read me wrong. I'm not just against priest-looking dudes who talk about God and who use Christian symbolism. One of my favorite dudes who I think is a good example of evolutionary spirituality is Michael Dowd. And he is a very priest-looking Christian symbolism using God-talking guy. But I think that there's a major difference between the two, and I'll talk about that more in detail a little bit later. But to me, it's kind of the elephant in the room that hasn't been addressed. I'll give you a hint.
I think there's also a lot of problems with language, and that's where you get into the transrational or the post-formal.
He's not speaking metaphorically. He's not talking about poetry. He's talking literally. This is his cosmology.
I mean, God, as I understand it, from a pantheistic conception, not a mythic judge, but a source of reality which can love and be loved.
If his conception of God can love and be loved, that must mean it's personal, which is the anthropomorphization that I was talking about. Just because your idea of God is not some kind of mean judge, but is some kind of all-loving, benevolent deity, doesn't mean your concept of God is non-mythical. Just because you reject a part of the mythical narrative doesn't mean that you've transcended the mythical narrative. These ideas of a transcendent, loving creator are still very much mythical, pre-rational ideas. And honestly, the idea that God would be some kind of benevolent, all-loving deity seems pretty green to me. Advocating for a belief system of any kind is not something a rational plus person would do. It's not a rational approach to knowledge. It's not a reason-based argument. A belief system based on personal experience is pre-rational. It's not the traditional biblical way that a Christian would necessarily normally take these ideas, but it's heavily influenced by those ways of seeing reality for sure. It's still theological. So it's a question like, how do you know that there is a transcendent? And he doesn't really answer. In fact, he says he doesn't know. And the second question is like, where do you think it's going? And how do you know? So these two bits, where everything comes from and where everything's going, are underlying unexamined assumptions or unexamined claims, unfounded assumptions and unfounded claims. And if we're going to be rigorous, if we're going to have integrity, we need to be able to back those claims up. Or say that we don't really know, which is kind of what he's done.
I don't claim to have any, special knowledge about what the truth of that is.
But he's also postulated his belief system as being true from the beginning. Now he says he's going to bracket it, but at the same time, he talks about it over and over as if it's true, as if he knows it throughout his talk.
The spirit is both transcendent and immanent. With the Big Bang, the finite universe becomes a part of the larger infinite universe. Infinity or perfection is partially withdrawn to create a space of freedom where we can participate in discovering what's relatively more perfect by our own volition. And that's in a sense our job, is to rediscover perfection experientially. This project of bringing the infinite back into the finite in our experience is an important part of what evolutionary spirituality understands as the purpose of humans here on Earth. That the beautiful, the true, and the good are each little flashing expressions of perfection, or the infinite. It's not as if the infinite becomes present. It's more accurate to say that the finite, the phenomenal world of appearances, becomes transparent to the infinite that's underneath, that's sort of upholding the universe from within. Beauty, truth, and goodness are more verbs than nouns. They're, in a sense, the direction of evolution. And when we experience the beautiful, the true, and the good, it's like we're experiencing the finite being moved toward the infinite.
Even in his statement, he says he brackets it.
I have to bracket that a little bit.
But then he also immediately says there is perfection.
Just because there is perfection. free will creatures discovering perfection by their own lights and gradually participating in the project of perfecting the universe.
And we are working on perfection. So he's already starting from these assumptions about where we're coming from and where we're going. And does that shape your idea about how to be in the meantime and how to get there? I think it does. I think it's definitely clear that your ideas about where you're coming from and where you're going affect what you do. So instead of having a talk that's supposed to be in light of what we know about science, he's preaching basically his belief system and trying to pass that off as what evolutionary spirituality is.
This is kind of my belief system. It's not a specific teaching of evolutionary spirituality. This project of bringing the infinite back into the finite in our experience is an important part of what evolutionary spirituality understands as the purpose of humans here on Earth. I have to bracket that a little bit. Bringing the infinite back into the finite is an important part of what evolutionary spirituality understands as the purpose of humans. This is kind of my belief system. It's not a specific teaching of evolutionary spirituality. Is an important part of what evolutionary spirituality understands. This is kind of my belief system. It's not a specific teaching of evolutionary spirituality.
This issue of integrity, of backing up what you say, of not making claims about things that you don't really know, like you actually do know, is a major pet peeve of mine. Like many people, I grew up in a very religious home, and I was a religious believer into my very early 20s, in part because so many people told me things like they knew they were true, and I believed them. Part of what I really respect about science and academia is their rigor and the fact that they won't just get up on a stage and talk about a bunch of stuff like they know that it's true when they don't really know. They might share ideas that aren't true, but they'll back them up with reasons and evidence to why they think that they're true. They're not just going to be like, this and this and this is true, this is what we know. And then when you ask them, how do you really know? They're not going to say, well, I don't really know. That's just what I like to believe. I think as a teacher, this is something that I think about quite often, is not being a misleader, taking my role as a teacher very seriously and making sure that I can back up what I say, give good reasons and evidence. And if I don't know something, I'm not going to pretend like I know. I think that there's a responsibility that goes along with being a teacher, which means not misleading your students with your authority. And I think that's a major problem here. I think that there's a lack of integrity in what's being said. I think there's some dishonesty here. I feel like we're talking about things like we know that they're true when we don't really know that they're true. And when our feet are held to the fire, we act like it's no big deal and it's all just fun and games. I'm not really cool with that. If what evolutionary spirituality is, like it seems like he's saying in the beginning, is that unlike green spirituality, or I forget exactly what he calls it.
Progressive spirituality.
Yes, thank you. Unlike that kind of spirituality, evolutionary spirituality factors in what science has to say about things. It's transrational or post-formal, which means it includes what science has to say.
So much of progressive spirituality is caught up in pseudoscience and magical thinking that at least most scientists wouldn't agree that science and spirituality is being adequately harmonized at the level of progressive spirituality.
So basically what he's done is this move.
The multiverse theory is currently fashionable among secular cosmologists. And I think that's sort of bad theology masquerading as cosmology, because it's, violates Occam's razor like crazy. Pierre Desjardins, right? And he had a famous concept of the omega point, cosmological speculation. Humans and spiritual beings as ascenders in time will transcend to another universe age. And that's getting pretty woo-woo.
That is the very embodiment of woo-woo.
I think it's possible to experience ultimate reality because, again, according to panentheism, ultimate reality or the infinite or the non-dual one or God or whatever word we want to use to talk about ultimate reality is that it's not only the circumference of the container,
what am I seeing here?
It's also the center of every quark. So our ability to experience it is not some necessarily.
It's not that easy being green when I think it could be nicer being red or yellow or gold or something much more colorful like that. It's not that easy being green.
I have clearly been staying up way too late working on this.
So one of the ways you can escape the gravity of the modernist worldview is to tone down the rationality. Tone down the rationality. Tone down the rationality. And look for spirit in ways that can be trans-rational or pre-rational or pre-rational or pre-rational or pre-rational in some cases.
He used the example of the multiverse, and he said the word secular cosmologists or secular scientists.
It's currently fashionable among secular cosmologists.
So we should actually find this to be really revealing. We should want secular scientists and cosmologists. We should want our science to not have spiritual or religious bias.
So much of progressive spirituality is caught up in pseudoscience and magical thinking.
Not seeing that is our main problem here. He says it's bad theology masquerading as science, which almost starts from the assumption that we need to have some kind of theological, cosmological, or metaphysical view. That is starting from a very bad assumption. I think if we're going to have integrity and actually speak about what we actually know, we have to start from a hard agnostic perspective, where we're not going to make claims about things that we don't actually know about. We're not going to talk about perfection and transcendence and other woo-woo, unfounded assumptions as if they're true. We shouldn't be doing that. So, secular cosmologists, and he brings out the multiverse.
The multiverse theory is currently fashionable among secular cosmologists.
I never said anything about the multiverse. So he's basically talking about theoretical physics, and he's saying theoretical physics is basically just a bunch of people doing theology. And he says that as some kind of a dismissal. Bad theology masquerading as science is what he said.
Bad theology masquerading as cosmology?
I'm open to almost any philosophical point of view, and I want a theory that's ultimately tested by data and confirmed that this is the way the world works.
There's a false assumption about science operating here. Science is not in principle committed to the idea that there's no afterlife, or that the mind is identical to the brain,
right,
or that materialism is true. Science is completely open to whatever in fact is true.
A theoretical physicist will be comfortable talking with real confidence in a very narrow band of his expertise. He will be exquisitely sensitive to the fact that whenever he opens his mouth in a room like this, he is guaranteed to be speaking in front of half a dozen people who know more on any given issue than he does. The great irony of the popular conception of science as arrogant is that when you go to a scientific meeting, I mean, you're about as likely to see real arrogance as you're likely to see nudity at a scientific conference. People are constantly offering caveats and hedges toward what they say. Every statement is couched in, I'm sure there's someone in the room who knows more about this than me, but, because everyone is desperate to avoid public embarrassment. Now, this seems to be something you're not doing.
He tries to discredit these theoretical physicists and basically say that they're religious people. But at the end of the day, they're creating a hypothesis that they're going to try to test, and they're going to falsify this thing. And if it's not falsifiable, I agree with you. It's just some bullshit. And a lot of it is still very theoretical. It's a lot of hypothesis. None of these people are coming down and saying that they actually have the proof. They're not going to give a talk with these implicit assumptions that the universe is a certain way. They're going to present it as a hypothesis. And then what does he trot out in its place?
You know, cosmological speculation. I think it's getting pretty woo-woo.
Bad theology masquerading as evolutionary spirituality and integral philosophy. So if you're wondering why integral theory doesn't have more respect in academia, this is why. So I think this has all kinds of problems. He's talking about perfection and transcendence and what seems like an inevitability, what seems like he's basically talking about idealism. He says that it's not like Platonism.
When I talk about the beautiful, the true, and the good, I'm not referring to these in the standard conception of Platonic forms.
But Platonism is basically a version of idealism. Maybe it's not exactly that flavor of idealism. And I think I see the difference. But we could bracket that. You know, Plato is saying something like, we could also bracket topics about time, even though that's very interesting. And ooh, I'm so tempted to talk more about free will.
Humans have free will.
We know free will is a non-starter philosophically and scientifically. Many people struggle not to admit this.
But maybe I can just say, check out Sam Harris's talk on why free will can't be true, and also check out my talk on semantic compatibilism and how it relates to ideas of free will and determinism.
The multiverse theory is currently fashionable among secular cosmologists. That's the idea that our universe is one of perhaps infinitely similar universes that have different laws of physics, and that the reason that our laws of physics are particularly situated for life is just like a cosmic lottery. You know, that there's all these other universes and that they're not right for life. We just happen to get lucky in our universe. And I think that's sort of bad theology masquerading as cosmology, because it's, violates Occam's razor like crazy.
So in the course of this 130-second clip, not only does he manage to reveal his bias, talking about secular cosmologists, he also manages to either miss or misrepresent my point, randomly bringing up the theory of the multiverse as an example of a cosmology, to then knock it down in a very strawman fallacy type of way. But in doing so, not only does he strawman my position, he strawmans the actual theory of the multiverse, pushing it into extreme randomness like Christians often do, revealing their limited understanding of science and how scientists actually think things work.
Fallacies that involve what I've called violations of the rules of rational argumentation. Things like being able and willing to reason well, not being willing to lie or distort things simply to win an argument, and so on. Commonly known as a straw man fallacy. The name comes from the practice of using human figures made of straw as practice dummies in military training. Obviously, it's easier and safer to practice certain combat techniques when your opponent is made of straw. The fallacy works like this. Alice offers an argument to Bob. She wants to convince him of something. Let's say that Alice's argument is really pretty strong.
Is it possible that the universe is infinite and there is nothing transcendent? Because then that seems like we get into problems of anthropomorphism and infinite regress.
Bob isn't sure he can handle this argument. So instead of trying to refute Alice's actual argument, Bob decides to engage a different argument. He decides to engage this straw figure. What is the straw figure?
The multiverse theory is currently fashionable among secular cosmologists.
It's a weaker, distorted version of Alice's original argument. Because it's weaker, Bob is easily able to refute the straw figure argument.
Because it's, violates Occam's razor like crazy.
The straw figure fallacy is complete when Bob does the dance of joy and claims that he has successfully refuted Alice's original argument.
Okay.
That's a question.
But of course, Bob hasn't refuted the original argument. He's only refuted a distorted misrepresentation of it.
I never said anything about the multiverse.
This is the straw figure or straw man fallacy. This fallacy is often categorized as a fallacy of relevance because the attacks made on the weak straw figure are irrelevant to judging the actual strengths and weaknesses of the original argument. And this is correct, but I prefer to think of it as a violation of the rules of rational argumentation, especially when it involves knowingly and willfully misrepresenting an argument. When someone is willing to do this, they're no longer playing by the rules. They're more concerned with the appearance of winning than with argumentation itself. When you see this going on, you should try to correct the misrepresentation and get the discussion back on track. If it's an honest mistake and the arguer is willing to correct their misunderstanding, that's great. But if you catch them doing this again and again, then there's probably no point in engaging argumentatively with this person, because they've shown you that they're not willing to play by the rules.
But then he mentions Occam's razor.
Because it's, violates Occam's razor like crazy.
You might have heard of Occam's razor. Plurality ought never be posited without necessity.
This has also been restated as, entities must not be multiplied beyond necessity, with the law of parsimony. And it is parsimony that Occam's razor is advocating. When given the choice of hundreds of possible explanations, the law of parsimony suggests that we investigate the simplest explanations first. The fewer forces, or mechanisms, or variables in an equation, or steps in a process we need, the clearer the explanation in general. We refer to it as a razor because, like a very sharp blade, it can be used to remove excess. In this case, remove the unnecessary assumptions from an argument. This is not a new idea. Thomas Aquinas made this argument in the 13th century, writing, "If a thing can be done adequately by means of one, it is superfluous to do it by means of several, for we observe that nature does not employ two instruments where one suffices." As the great philosopher of science Karl Popper once said, we prefer simpler theories to more complex ones, because their empirical content is greater, and because they are better testable. Equally important is what parsimony isn't. It is not a theory. It is not a commandment. It is never a substitute for full explanations that require many forces acting in concert, or an equation requiring many variables. It never takes precedence over the better explanation or good logic. That's important to understand. This is a general guideline for when two explanations are equally explanatory. Many famous people have restated the principle of parsimony over the years. Isaac Newton wrote, "We are to admit no more causes of natural things than such as are both true and sufficient to explain their appearances." Questionably attributed quote of Einstein. Make everything as simple as possible, but not simpler. Walter of Catten, who was a contemporary of William of Ockham, devised one that could be stated as, if three things are not enough to verify an affirmative position about things, a fourth must be added, and so on. Intelligent design creationists, for example, could argue that given the extraordinary nature of living things, intelligent design is the simplest explanation, and requiring naturalistic explanations for all the complexity in nature is a violation of parsimony. The counter-argument from the scientific perspective is that requiring a supernatural explanation is a violation of parsimony because it invokes an undetectable force to explain nature. So is the razor worthless in these situations? Not entirely. What is needed is an objective measurement to stand in for simplicity, which is, as I said, a purely subjective concept. I would propose empirical evidence, another way of saying testability. My own version of the razor would read, if two explanations are equal, the one with empirical evidentiary support is best. For example, there is no empirical evidence of creationism, as in we have no observations of creation in action in a controlled environment. There is no micro-creation, but there is a micro-evolution that is empirically supported.
And can you believe it? Like, that is actually my whole point when I'm asking him, how does he know that this transcendent God exists?
Where did God come from? If we decide that this is an unanswerable question, why not save a step and conclude that the origin of the universe is an unanswerable question? Or, if we say that God always existed, why not save a step and conclude that the universe always existed? There's no need for a creation. It was always here.
Is it possible that the universe is infinite and there is nothing transcendent? Because then that seems like we get into problems of anthropomorphism and infinite regress.
So when I'm attempting to cut down his view with Occam's razor, he brings out some straw man version of my view, the multiverse, and tries to cut that up with Occam's razor, and then acts like he won when he never proved his own point to me in the first place. He just cut down some distorted version of my perspective. Look at the source that he cites. It's a Jesuit priest. He has some good things to say, which I can see the tie to integral theory, so I can see how he is saying this guy is one of the founding fathers of evolutionary spirituality, for sure. But it's an idealistic metaphysics. So not only is he talking about this transcendent source, which opens up a space for evolution to happen, but this idea of the omega point is basically the reverse of something like the Big Bang Theory, where the bang happens and then there's all this emergent complexity that unfolds. The idea in the omega point is the reason it's all unfolding in the complexity is because it's emerging towards an omega point, which is actually this point in the future, which is pulling history towards it. So it's like there's an inevitable telos to the cosmos. There's a directionality to life, an inevitability. So that's a lot of like unfounded belief stuff. That's a whole bunch of religious ideas. And honestly, there's no good reason to believe in any of that. Like, if you believe in that, I'm wondering what's wrong with your epistemology.
Ultimate reality is an experience. It's not just cosmic speculation. It is legitimately possible to experience directly in a spiritual experience ultimate reality. And saints and sages down through the ages have glimpsed the ultimate and brought back reports of its character and its nature and its quality.
Yes, it's true that saints and sages have brought back stories from these amazing experiences that they've had. But what they have to say about the absolute is not only contradictory, but it's from a human limited perspective.
God has not revealed himself to me. Even if he did, I'm not sure how I could be confident that it wasn't just some kind of delusion, reinforced by my desires or my culture.
Oh, trust me, you'd know. God revealed himself to me.
Me too.
Oh, really? Pleased to meet you.
I have felt God in my heart. God speaks to me. I have a close personal relationship with God. Me too. Amen. You see, God isn't silent. He speaks to us all, right? We can't all be wrong. You just need to open the door when you hear God knock.
We all have a close personal relationship with God, and you can too.
Just accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior.
Whoa, hold on there. Jesus, peace be upon him, was a prophet, but he was not God.
Yes, he is. The only way to be saved is through faith in Jesus Christ.
Well, not faith alone. Faith without works is dead. Not so fast. All of our righteous acts are like filthy rags to God.
It doesn't matter. God loves us all. We will all go to heaven and see the truth then.
You think even Hitler is going to heaven?
Even Hitler.
I'm sorry, but Hitler's gotta burn.
Not if he repented.
Hitler's going to hell. You've all been blinded by Satan.
Jesus visited the Indians and cursed black people.
Say what?
And I'm going to get my own planet after I die.
Not if Zeno escapes his volcano prison. Say what? Oogly skoogul kootalulu labby dabby kakas slop. I believe I can straighten this all out. We Jews are the chosen people. Chosen for what? To steal other people's lands? That land was rightfully given to us by God. It was not! If God is speaking to all of you, then he appears to be telling all of you very different, contradictory things. Perhaps this rather glaring discrepancy can be explained if we examine the fact that your relationship with God seems to be precisely shaped by the culture in which you were raised and the predominant version of God you were taught to believe in. Sure, there are exceptions, but typically religion obeys borders, while truth does not. In America, God is Yahweh, while in India, God is Vishnu. The truth does not behave this way. In America, 2 + 2 is 4, and in India, 2 + 2 also equals 4. If God's message to us was so dire, so vitally important, then why wouldn't he give it to us in such a clear and precise way, rather than trusting his precious message to be spread by fallible, corruptible human beings? Why would Almighty God allow the continuation of such widespread falsehoods in his name, which would be effortless for him to correct, or never even need to correct in the first place, because a perfect being would have gotten it right from the very beginning?
On one side, on our interiors, we have our subjective experience. And on the other side, there's objective reality. And in the middle, there's a relative filter of culturally constructed meanings, values, and symbols. We have our subjective experience, and everything that we know has been communicated to us by some person in the objective reality. So we get, coming this way, sense information. You see things, you hear things, that's all sense information. It shapes your perspective, and it expands your perspective. And you have this expression and projection which defines your experience. So we have incredibly limited perspectives, and everything that we know is based on our experience of the objective reality, which in a sense has already been predefined based on what we had previously known. So we're always experiencing any new situation in the light of what we had already understood and what had already been communicated to us by people in our culture. And this is called the Hermeneutic Circle.
Hermeneutic Circle is a philosophical term that refers to concepts that explain each other and that need each other for their full understanding. So spiritual teachings instruct us about spiritual practice. Spiritual practice leads to spiritual experience. Spiritual experience then informs and enhances our understanding of spiritual truth. And so evolutionary spirituality attempts to increase our hold on spiritual experience, to bring that more abundantly into our lives by working on spiritual teachings, by improving the spiritual teachings that are on offer in our culture.
Actually, let me just say that when you first get introduced into a new tradition, you get taught the spiritual teachings. Then you get introduced into the spiritual practices, you might have a spiritual experience, and you will then interpret that experience in the light of the spiritual teachings. This is called cultural conditioning. This is called confirmation bias. This is called circular reasoning. What I would not call it is evolutionary spirituality. It's the same kind of trap that tons of pre-rational people get trapped in.
All wild animals have to be kind of natural statisticians, looking for patterns in the apparent randomness of nature when they're looking for food or trying to avoid predators. There are two kinds of mistakes they can make. They can either fail to detect pattern when there is some, or they can seem to detect pattern when there isn't any, and that's superstition.
60 years ago, the American psychologist B.F. Skinner investigated the behavior of pigeons, rewarding them with food when they learned to peck a key in the feeding apparatus. But then, Skinner set the apparatus to reward the birds at random. Now the pigeons just have to sit back and wait. But that isn't what they did. Instead, the majority developed what Skinner called superstitious behavior.
When an individual pigeon, for example, happened to look over its left shoulder, and the reward mechanism just happened to kick in at that point, it would have got the idea that it was looking over the left shoulder that had got it the reward, so it tried it again. By sheer luck, as it happened, the reward mechanism delivered food at the same time again. And so the pigeon was reinforced in its idea that looking over the left shoulder was what got it the reward. And it went on, and turned into a maniac for looking over the left shoulder.
When it comes to the absolute, the way to know it is not going to be through some subjective experience. Any understanding of an experience that you have, any words that you could say about an experience of the absolute is absolutely wrong. And there's no way out of that hermeneutic circle of interpretation. There's no view from nowhere. There's no getting outside of everything. And it's when you start to think about or interpret that experience, that's when it gets culturally molded. That's when you take whatever ideas you happen to have at the time and you try to explain it in terms of those. That's where we go wrong in understanding what these experiences are and understanding the reality that we live in. So this can be majorly problematic. So not only can these experiences be majorly transformative, they can be majorly confusing and stifling.
Any religion or spirituality in the future will be focused increasingly on the direct experience of spirit. So what is the spiritual experience? The presence of the infinite.
Look at the great traditions. They all agree that there are at least 4, usually 5, major states of consciousness that everybody has access to. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep are the simplest. I'm writing this just across the top as gross, subtle, causal, and non-dual. The waking state, dreaming state, deep, formless sleep state. What we find is that if you take somebody at a particular stage of development, and here I'm using the simple Gene Gebser stages. So I've written archaic, magic, mythic or traditional, rational or modern, pluralistic or postmodern, and integral or higher. You can be at a traditional mythic stage, and if you experience these states, you'll interpret it in those terms. Because you only have the mind to interpret what's arising. If you have a peak experience, as I was saying, let's say you're at the mythic stage or wave of development, and you have an experience of a subtle being of light, and you come from a culture that's Christian, you very likely interpret that as Jesus, perhaps. You can be at the rational level of development, like Bertrand Russell was, for example, and he had the experience of nature mysticism, but he interpreted it, of course, in rational terms. That's almost all you can do. And if you experience these states, you'll interpret it in those terms. Because you only have the mind to interpret what's arising. It's very common, it's culturally molded. Because you only have the mind to interpret what's arising. It's very common, it's culturally molded. If you're in China or in Southeast Asia and you have an experience of light, it might very well have 10,000 arms. It might very well be Avalokiteshvara. You're never going to find a Southern Baptist seeing 10,000 arms. I mean, it's just very, very rare.
Having an experience of undivided consciousness does not tell you what consciousness really is or what its relationship to the brain really is. There's nothing about introspection that leads you to sense that your subjectivity is at all dependent or even related to voltage changes and chemical interactions going on inside your head. You can drop acid, you can meditate for a year, you can do whatever you want to perturb your nervous system. You can feel yourself to be one with the universe, and at no point in that transformation do you get a glimpse that there's 100 trillion neurons in your head, or synapses in your head, that are doing anything. It's called absolute subjective ignorance of what's actually going on outside your consciousness. It cannot possibly be justified.
That's why it's a statement of metaphysics, not of physics.
No, metaphysical statements also have to be justified, as it turns out.
Metaphysics statements come from subjective experiences.
No, metaphysical statements also have to be justified, as it turns out.
Okay, now let's check out this graph. This has to do with what counts as evidence. For example, a lot of religious people will say that their religious experiences are good evidence of God or some truth about the cosmos. So in the upper left, you have someone's intention, their consciousness, known by their felt experience. Now you may know what you felt, and that is a type of fact, as we've already said, but let's say if you're doing meditation or something, no amount of looking at the inside of your mind is going to be able to tell you truths about the external reality. If you go to the upper right, you have behavior, objective realities of all beings at all levels of organization, and it's known by measurement. Or this could just be tangible facts. 1 + 1 is 2. That's how you know objective things. In the lower left, it says it's culture, known by mutual resonance, intersubjective realities of all beings. So how do we know what people feel or what the meaning of something is? We ask a bunch of people, and that's a type of truth too. It's not the whole truth, it's a type of relative cultural meaning of truth. Then in the lower right, you have systems theory, known by systemic analysis, interobjective realities of all beings at all levels of intersection. So for example, the kinds of reasons that you have for idealistic metaphysical claims are going to be based on upper left quadrant felt experiences, and through lower left traditional dogma and indoctrination, cultural conditioning. The way that we know that consciousness is a byproduct of matter is known by systemic analysis. So in a sense, you have idealism making claims about the ultimate truth of reality based on cultural meanings and felt experiences, and you have materialism, which is known through objective measurement and systemic analysis. I would tell you, idealism is qualifying the unqualifiable, making claims about things that are beyond anyone's ability to make claims about. Whereas, to some extent, materialism is a relative fact. It doesn't get at the ultimate truth of everything, and it can't be reduced to mere empiricism, but we can know, based on the cosmology that we already have, that consciousness is a byproduct of matter, not the source of matter. So, depending on what kind of claim you're making, you have to look at the relative quadrant to get the data. So for example, taking a vote is not a way to get at the objective truth. Looking at your still mind is not a way to know the truth about cosmology. And measuring someone's brainwaves is not a good way to know what their felt experience is like. So all of these disciplines have to be qualified in their own quadrants.
But these saints and sages differ widely about there's not clear agreement about what is ultimate, even among the most advanced forms of spirituality. But of course, different spiritual traditions take this idea of spiritual infinity in different directions, right? So like Buddhism recognizes non-duality as infinite in its own way. Christianity recognizes God as infinite. So the nice thing about conceiving of spirit as a sort of a base mark is that it's agreeable while still being descriptive. Alfred North Whitehead or Sri Aurobindo in the 20th century were big proponents of the central significance of these values, or these concepts on the spiritual path.
So he's basically advocating for mishmashing together all kinds of idealistic worldviews that are completely different under the heading of spirit, squishing things together that don't go together just by using the same word like spirit or God or something like that. People like Whitehead and Aurobindo and Chardin, all idealists and dualists in terms of cosmology and metaphysics, but none of these people agree about what spirit is in terms of the details. This is more of this green false attempts at consensus and bad integration, pre-trans confusion.
They're true in different senses, do you see? Here's a whole mythology based on the insight that transcends duality. Ours is a mythology that's based on the insight of duality.
And this idea that all religions are essentially the same, it blinds us to the distinctions that we need to see in order to understand them, but it also blinds us to the unique beauty that we find in each of the religions. If basically Taoism is essentially the same as Christianity, well, what is there to learn from studying Taoism? What's the difference between a Taoist in China and a Christian here in Washington, D.C.? Nobody with any intelligence says that the religions are exactly the same. I mean, clearly Muslims go on the Hajj to Mecca and Christians don't go on the Hajj to Mecca, and Muslims don't follow the 7 sacraments of Catholicism, nor do they follow the 4 noble truths of Buddhism. So clearly there are differences across religions, and that isn't the question. The question is whether those differences matter, whether those differences are, as many say, inessential or inconsequential. And I frankly think it's condescending to say, oh, well, the Hajj doesn't really matter. Tell a Muslim that. Like, how can it not matter? It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Or the 5 prayers a day that Muslims insist on, also as part of the 5 pillars of Islam. What's inconsequential or inessential about that? What always happens when people want to push the great religions into one box, into one mountaintop, right, rather than many mountaintops, is you come up with your own ad hoc idea of what the mountaintop is, right? Oops, it just happens to be my vision of what religion should be.
The presence of the infinite.
Right, so maybe ultimately there's one God.
This loving creator that lives within us and that knows us.
Who maybe sounds and talks and walks a lot like Jesus. Or, maybe it's the mystical experience, which just happens to be the piece of religion that you value.
Any religion or spirituality of the future will be focused increasingly on the direct experience of spirit. So what is the spiritual experience? The presence of the infinite.
Or maybe it's compassion, which just happens to be your particular preoccupation with what the religion should be doing. But in any case, it's you.
Pierre Desjardins. And he had a famous concept of the omega point. And I think it's interesting.
Look at the issue of race, for example, race and ethnicity. There was a time when we thought that the way to get along was to be colorblind, right? To sort of just pretend. We're all human beings. Who cares if somebody's black or somebody's Hispanic or somebody's Chicana or if somebody's, Chinese? It doesn't matter. Well, we figured out that didn't work, because always what happens there is somebody insinuates, it's usually a white person of privilege, insinuates into the generic human being their sense of what it is to be human. And we've had the same thing with religion. There's too much of the insinuation of Christian values into this sort of generic human religiosity that people want to talk about. And I want to be able to hear what the Confucians say, what the Taoists say, what the Buddhists say, what the Jews say about what religion is, and that's what I try to do.
Their partialities point to another major form of spiritual experience, of ultimate reality, that doesn't fit very well within a non-dual teaching frame. And I think that this idea of the love of God, especially when understood in the light of what we've learned from non-duality, points to a kind of its own attractor basin of spiritual experience with its own specific practices. So just as if you take up meditation and you do it vigorously with rigor for years, it's likely that you may have a samadhi experience. And likewise, if you take up the practices of theistic spirituality, faith, prayer, practicing the presence of God, there's a similar kind of deep apogee or profound spiritual experience which has been described by saints and sages down through the ages, and that's being personally known and cared for by the source of the universe. And within progressive spirituality, the idea of faith and prayer is often conceived of as being merely a religious spiritual conception, that we've sort of outgrown, and that's evolutionarily understandable. Pushing off against religious spirituality was a very important evolutionary project. The concept of the love of God, while generally okay within progressive spirituality, is sort of toned down or philosophically ungrounded. Because love is irreducibly relational, right? If there's only one thing, if there's no separation, then it's hard to ground philosophically this idea of love. But if we allow for a panentheistic conception of creator and creature, then the idea of love, the love of God, can be reclaimed in a way that doesn't cause us to regress to the mythic level of religious spirituality. So this is a big breakthrough for evolutionary spirituality.
So the way he makes a case for his God is that he says there's an attractor basin, like if you comport yourself in this particular kind of way and condition yourself, you'll have this experience, and that experience is the love of a creator God. So basically, if you believe these kinds of things and do these kinds of practices, you'll have this kind of an experience. So what? That's not good evidence for this worldview. I mean, you could say that about almost any kind of religion or cult or anything. You could say that about STDs. I mean, like, I could come up with all kinds of foul examples or whatever, but just because there is an experience that you can get by convincing yourself into some kind of perspective doesn't at all imply that that makes it valid or worthwhile. Now I'm going to share with you just a taste of Terence McKenna talking about his DMT experience. And think about what Steve is saying about focusing more and more on personal spiritual experiences and these attractor basins, where if you tune yourself in the right way with the right kind of conditioning and the right kind of focus and the right kind of practice, you will have these particular experiences. Think about these different justifications he's giving in defense of reducing evolutionary spirituality to his own particular flavor of spiritual experience.
If you have the DMT experience, death by astonishment seems the major danger. And it is not a unitary experience. It's extremely multiplistic, and it's extremely specific in its presentation. And when you smoke DMT, you have the feeling that you have burst into a place. And within that space, the first shock is that it's inhabited. They are like jeweled, self-dribbling basketballs. And there are many of them. And they come out of the background and they present themselves to you. They're literally vibrating up and down with excitement. They're faceted and rotating. And they see you as clearly as you see them. They even greet you. Some of you may recall the Pink Floyd song, "The Gnomes Have Learned a New Way to Say Hooray." As you burst into this space, the gnomes say hooray. And they present themselves, and they are truly the gnomes of Central European fairy tales, archetypal gnomes. They're very humorous. They're very mercurial and delightful. Hovers just on the edge of changing from mayhem to mania. Very intense. The most striking thing to me, and really the motivation for my career, is they are displaying new models of language that have never been seen before. They sing, and out of their singing elfin chatter condense objects. And these hyperdimensional objects are themselves undergoing a dynamic transformation. They're not static. They are undergoing changes, singing, condensing other objects. These objects are crawling all over the ground in front of you, clamoring for your attention. Now remember, 12 seconds before you were sitting in a suburban living room somewhere grappling with some drug somebody wanted you to take. Now all that's gone, and here are these things. I call them tykes. The tykes want to initiate you. They have a message, and the message is, you can do what we are doing. And what they're doing is using their voices to make physical objects condense out of the air. And they're saying, you can do this. Do it. Do it. Do it. And they're on you, and they jump in and out of your chest, which is something that is described in the Amazon too. And they are saying, do this thing, do it, suspend your belief, and eventually you do it. You discover that you can drop the filter of meaning, that your voice can move back several registers, and out comes elf chatter. And this elf chatter is able to wring the air in front of you like a washcloth and get alchemical gold to drip out of the air and to begin to condense in front of you. By this time, most people would like to call time out. There is no time out. It just keeps going. The very first time I smoked DMT, with absolutely no expectation, this happened to me. And it has happened every time since. And then I've had occasion to observe people taking DMT in countries where it's legal. And what I see is there is an archetype which surrounds DMT, which you must make your way through. The archetype is the circus or the carnival. It has two aspects. One is blazing light and activity. At the center of the triple ring, the lady in the spangled costume is high above the main floor, and the lions and the tigers and the clowns are parading around. That's part of it. But it has another aspect. Just off to the side of the big tent, there are the sideshows, the hoochie-coochie dancers, the two-headed man, and so forth and so on. In other words, there's this kinky, peculiar, shadow side of it. When you finally come into the center of it, these are all seen to be veils. If you have the DMT experience on the way to the center of that flash, you'll probably have all the other ones. It seems to lie at the center of the mandala. It veils itself that way because it's the old candy to the baby routine. It treats us as people who would like to go to the circus. And then it takes us to the circus. But then there is a revelation beyond that. I don't know how many people present in this room have confronted the thing I'm talking about. I always, at this moment, am aware that some people are saying, my, doesn't he perfectly get it? And other people are saying, huh? What is this? What is this guy talking about? The point I want to make is it's real. It's not vague. You don't have to strain for it. Nobody wonders whether or not it happened to them. It's just like somebody walking up to you and taking you by the arm and saying, there's something I insist on showing you. Come this way, please. It was the presence of the entities that shattered the person who I was. I had no room for elves in my cosmology. And here they were, hundreds of them.
So is that what we want to say that evolutionary spirituality is? Why not? If we're going by the standards that Steve has laid out, then this very well could be an example of evolutionary spirituality. For my taste, I prefer this to what Steve is talking about.
The presence of the entities.
The presence of the infinite.
The presence of the entities.
The presence of the infinite.
Think about what it might be like to try to have to incorporate every experience that might have some kind of an attractor basin around it.
There's an interdependent polarity in these two major attractor bases of spiritual experience. And this can be understood as non-dual oneness and the love of God. Within progressive spirituality, the pluralistic impulses want to say that they're the same thing, or they're just different paths to the top of the same mountain. And that's admirable. It's good to welcome everything and be pluralistically open and include. That's a good impulse. But we can get to deeper truth than that and recognize that these two different kinds of spirituality are actually challenging each other, even while they complement each other. That is, they are like two legs of our progress, that the tension energy, the existential challenge that one offers to the other is actually the energy that we need for transcendence itself. I mean, clearly there's, non-dual ultimate reality is a very important part of ultimate reality. But there's another deep experience of ultimate reality, as I'm describing the love of God, which, in a sense, challenges, right?
Well, and of course, humanity has developed both. I mean, in Buddhism and other non-theistic religions, it was done expressly without a creator God.
Sure.
And in the West, it was built all around a creator God. That itself, to me, as citizen of the world, argues that there's got to be some truth to both.
That's a really simplistic view of religion. There are a ton of different religions and a ton of different inflections and a ton of different versions. And just because it exists, there's some truth to it, is kind of a dangerous perspective. We want to integrate things in context and not just accept everything and be like, well, it exists, there must be something to it. Of course we want to integrate in everything, but everything in context, diversity with discernment, translation, and how you understand a thing is an important factor in including it. It's how we integrate things that makes all the difference. This is just a very simplistic view of what religion is and a very sloppy integration. First of all, Buddhism is based on a creation myth, the Hindu creation myth. Hinduism and Judaism are ethnocentric traditions, and out of those ethnocentric traditions grow Christianity and Buddhism, which are universal religions, but they're born out of the ethnocentric tradition. You're born a Hindu or a Jew, but you confess Buddhism or Christianity. But both Hinduism and Christianity are based on Hindu and Jewish assumptions about the nature of reality. But that's just one thing that's wrong with this. There's this kind of fundamental assumption that you have this paradoxical duality between the Eastern and the Western God. Well, this is not a fundamental dualistic paradox. These are two distinct, different cultural inflections of traditions among many. And there are many different other ones you're not factoring in. Old school shamanic stuff, any kind of pagan traditions. You do have this kind of duality of like the God on the inside and the God on the outside. The God who woke up inside of and became the universe, and a God who created the universe from the outside. But those are mutually exclusive stories. Those are not paradoxical dualities that somehow work together in some kind of way, like male and female, individual and communal, or anything like that. And they both focus on the absolute in their own way. Whereas the more pagan traditions tend to be more this worldly. So the Eastern and Western religions are both idealistic, and I can see why you can maybe find some common ground in spirit. But there are also these other traditions that need to be skillfully included and integrated. A big part of what is being left out here would also deconstruct the idealistic worldview and put that in perspective, to be able to get value out of all of this comparative mythology is what skillful integration looks like. So there's another fundamental paradox, if there is one, between a focus on the absolute and a focus on the immanent. But where is that included in this dualistic paradox? Or is it more that there are a plurality of different attractor basins? It's not just a matter of these sort of simplistic dualities. I do think that there's a way to study comparative mythology skillfully, and I don't think Steve is doing it. I think he's taking one story literally and arguing for its inclusion. In just a bit, I'll talk more about transrationality and how to actually translate and include all cultural symbolism to see the poetry inherent in all these traditions without getting caught up in the superstitious muck of taking any of them literally. Including what Steve is talking about, and including what Terence McKenna is talking about. I think you can even kind of tell from the way he speaks about his experience that he knows that it's a symbolic, poetic, archetypal language. Speaking integrally, one of the problems that's happening here is that Steve, Terence McKenna, and a lot of these other idealists are looking in the wrong quadrant for data. They are looking in their upper left, personal, subjective, interior, imaginative consciousness, and then drawing conclusions about the exterior truth of the nature of reality. They're looking in the wrong quadrant for data. That's not how we do it. That's a major problem in methodology.
I notice as I'm hearing you talk that there's a little thrill sensation arising in my body and in my psyche, because to see this values gravity towards goodness, truth, and beauty just built into the system, and to see how it's been unfolding not only in the culture at large, but also in my own life and in history and in the whole history of the cosmos. It's starting to feel like there's not only an intelligence behind it, but also a love, or there's also a loving intelligence or a personality at work here. And I wonder how this view can actually provide the basis of a deep spiritual life and practice that is postmodern, is post-mythic, where the scientific truth of evolution can be the basis for an authentic spiritual path.
Yes, indeed. I mean, and I thanks for bringing that up. So we're like the portal that brings the infinite through into the finite. Human consciousness, because of its recognition of these elements of infinity, you know, the beauty, the true, and the good, as that light shines into the phenomenal world, the finite world, we see it as these values. And as our consciousness evolves, as the opening widens, we are able to see presence of the infinite with increasing depth and clarity. And this, in a sense, is sort of the new truth of evolutionary spirituality that's revealed by our understanding of evolution itself.
Wow.
So
cool.
Yeah.
A lot of this idealism, a lot of the metaphysics and storytelling around it is real beautiful and real intriguing, and it's rooted in the traditional stories that religions have told all over the world, that humanity has believed in for thousands and thousands of years. So we're very, very steeped in this one particular type of poetry, and we understand its themes and it sings to us still. And that's good, and a lot of it can be qualified in transrational kind of terminology where we can say this is a good metaphor.
Every mythology, every religion is true in this sense. It is true as metaphorical of the human and cosmic mystery. But when it gets stuck to the metaphor, then you're in trouble.
Check out this quote by Pierre Desjardins. He says, "We're not human beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience."
it's not as if the infinite becomes present. It's more accurate to say that the finite, the phenomenal world of appearances, becomes transparent to the infinite that's underneath, that's sort of upholding the universe from within.
And I actually do take issue with that. A lot of these ideas are rooted in traditional views that tend to over-glorify the absolute and the transcendent. Like Buddhism can be very escapist. It doesn't want to be caught up in Maya or the world of illusion.
That's the big joke. The Zen master laughs. Wake up. It never happened. It's all a big dream. Wake up, everybody. It's all a joke. Consciousness is the only reality. And the whole world of time and becoming is an illusion. Vibration. Just being. No urgency whatsoever. Everything is cool. There's no urgency. The SS is coming. It's not real. Global warming's happening. I'm free because I'm free from the process. I'm beyond it. I'm free from it. I was never part of it. I'm free. I'm already free. Say, I know that, but I need you to be here with me. Now be here. Come, be here. You know, I'm free from it. I've always been here. Where else could I be? No, I need you to be here with me. I'm always with you. See, now you see where I get in so much trouble.
On the absolute side, the analogy is if you're in a dream at night and there are thousands of people starving, there are two ways you can stop their hunger. One is in the dream you can try to feed them all. Or the second is you can wake up, and that will end their suffering immediately.
There's all these ways of talking about reality like it's not real, or that it's like fallen or lesser than. And speaking of fallen and lesser than, you have these ideas definitely bound up in the Christian tradition, where reality or nature is fallen and evil and separate and needs to be corrected, or in this case, perfected.
You cannot be saved by earthly wisdom.
It's in the biblical tradition, all the way, in Christianity and Islam as well. This business of not being with nature, and we speak with sort of derogation of the nature religions. You get a totally different civilization, a totally different way of living, according to your myth as to whether nature is fallen or whether nature is itself a manifestation of divinity. There was the cobra, the giver of life, as a divine, positive, not negative figure.
The Christian story has turned it around because the serpent was the seducer.
Well, but what that amounts to is a refusal to affirm life.
The principal actors are pointing to someone else as the initiator of the fall.
Yeah, but it turns out to be Snake. And Snake in both of these stories is the symbol of life throwing off the past and continuing to live.
Why?
Because the snake sheds its skin, just as the moon sheds its shadow. The snake in most cultures is positive, because the serpent represents the power of life in the field of time to throw off death. And the Buddha represents the power of life in the field of eternity to be eternally alive.
Women have paid a great price because in mythology, they are the ones who led to the downfall.
Of course they did. I mean, they represent life. Man doesn't enter life except by woman. And so it is woman who brings us into the world of polarities and pair of opposites and suffering and all. But I think it's a really childish attitude to say no to life with all its pain, you know? To say this is something that should not have been. There's a wonderful formula that the Buddhists have for the Bodhisattva, who realizes his identity with eternity and at the same time his participation in time. And the attitude is not to withdraw from the world when you realize how horrible it is, but to realize that this horror is simply the foreground of a wonder. And come back and participate in it. All life is sorrowful, is the first Buddhist saying, and it is. It wouldn't be life if there were not temporality involved, which is sorrow, loss, loss, loss. You gotta say yes to it and say it's great this way. I mean, this is the way God intended it.
You don't really believe that?
But this is the way it is. And I don't believe anybody intended it, but this is the way it is. All of this, as it is as it has to be, and it is a manifestation of the eternal presence in the world. The end of things always is painful. Pain is part of there being a world at all.
Couldn't one draw the philosophy of nihilism?
Well, that's not the necessary thing to withdraw. You could say, I will participate in this row, and I will join the army, and I will go to war. I will participate in the game. It's a wonderful, wonderful opera, except that it hurts. There's a passage in Paul's epistle to the Philippians, be as Christ, for Christ did not think godhood something to be hung on to be clung to, but let go and came down and took life in the form of a servant even unto death. Let's say, come in and accept the suffering and affirm it. The coming of Christ to be crucified and illustrating thus the suffering of life removes man's mind from commitment to the things of this world in compassion. It's in compassion with Christ that we turn to Christ. And so the injured one becomes the Savior. It is the suffering that evokes the humanity of the human heart. And by contemplating the cross, you are contemplating the true mystery of life. And that love for this experience, no matter how horrific the experience, the love for it.
So there's joy and pain in love.
Yeah, there is. Love, you might say, is the burning point of life. And since all life is sorrowful, so is love. And the stronger the love, the more that pain, but love bears all things. Love itself is a pain, you might say, that is the pain of being truly alive. It's whether you're going to say no to the serpent or yes to the serpent. It's easy as that.
No to the adventure?
Yeah, the adventure of being alive, of living.
I really like this idea. Without struggle, there's no growth. Without risk, there's no adventure. Part of what it is to be alive is to have to struggle. But it's also having projects that makes life worth living. If everything was perfect, there'd be nothing to do. It's like if you ever try to play a video game on God mode. It's not as fun and it's not as much of an accomplishment to win. I think that's part of what makes life great, is that there's projects, that there's something to do, something to achieve, that we can work together to make things better. And not better for some otherworldly thing, but better for the relevant people and animals and ecosystems who are involved. So in an absolute sense, you might say that life and the universe and reality is already perfect. That's part of what I think is good about having an evolutionary emergent view, is that you can see refinement and evolution is doing something. Things are getting better in a relative sense. I'm not saying it's absolutely going somewhere or has some kind of ultimate telos or ultimate end in perfection, but things are getting better in some sense. There has been a lot of work put in by tons of people who've cared throughout thousands of years of history, at least human history, to try to make the world a better place for everyone, and that really means something. And we need to do that in our time as well. So to me, that's what evolutionary spirituality is about.
This is it. This moment now is the heavenly moment. And
I like the idea that Eden was not, Eden will be.
Eden is. The kingdom of the Father spread upon the earth, and men do not see it. I mean, Eden is.
So this is an example of that non-dual perspective, being able to see both the absolute big picture truths and also the relative truths.
You're in the field of time when you're man. And one of the problems of life is to live in the realization of both terms.
So I would say in an absolute sense, you have perfection, a beautiful process that is great to be a part of. And in a relative sense, You have problems, the drama of life. It's great to have the beautiful movie. It's hard to be in it and see the heroes and the characters suffer. But would you want to not have the movie because there's the suffering? The movie's perfect with the suffering. You need to have it in there for there to be drama, for there to be tension, for there to be something going on in the movie. I think evolution is a perfect system. I think it's perfect to have this kind of situation where you have to strive and struggle to grow, to be something. You have to work for it. It means something to achieve something, because it's fucking hard to become. To become anything, it takes work. And so when you become something, it means something. That's like why heaven is so meaningless to people. It's like this idea of, perfection and this like one-note song for eternity. It's fucking boring. It's impermanence that makes things special. It's the fact that you only get this one time, that this event is only going to happen once. There's no trial run. This is your only chance at life. Don't blow it. This is the kind of thing that's weighing heavy on you. Am I going to take it up? Am I going to do something with it? Am I going to move the ball forward? Am I going to live selfishly for myself? Or am I going to do something special for the bigger picture that I care about? And I know that who and what I really am beyond local customs and traditions and ways of talking about things is this bigger emergent process that's moving through me. In a relative sense, you can see that there's all these problems. But in an absolute sense, you can see that from a big picture perspective, it's all a part of a bigger process. It's like if you're going through a breakup or something, it feels like the end of the world. That's an opportunity for you to grow, for you to introspect and learn about yourself. And yeah, it sucks, it seems negative in the moment, and there's all these details, blah, blah, blah. But in the big picture sense, you might look back on your life and say, that was a positive point in my life because it helped me to reorient and change and do things differently. So we need a spirituality that helps us to see the perfection in the breakup and not hold some kind of mythical ideas about finding perfection in getting back together with our soulmate and some other kind of thing like that. We need a spirituality that appreciates the perfection in the struggle, not a spirituality that is looking for some otherworldly perfection. So that's what I mean about, in a big picture sense, I think it's perfect already. We don't need transcendence to be perfect. All we need to do is appreciate the fact that life is perfect, even though it hurts, even though it's painful. And we should say yes to life with all of its pain. And that's what I mean about having a spiritual view that's life-affirming. That's saying yes to the struggle, not trying to get out of it, or say that we're going to be perfect when we transcend it. No, it's perfect as it is. It just hurts and it's hard. But to live is to be a part of this process, is to be caught up in this beautiful opera. So I don't think we should be looking for some otherworldly, transcendent answer. What we need is a religion that helps us appreciate what we have. One of the things I'm interested in terms of this idea of the omega point and God as the benevolent creator is the problem of suffering or evil. This is a common talking point or meme in a lot of the atheist-theist type of debates. And it basically goes something like this. There's suffering in the world. People do evil things and hurt other people. But you have God, who is supposedly an all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful being. And God answers prayers, supposedly. So why do bad things happen to good people? How can there be all this messed up stuff going on when God is all-loving and all-powerful? So I'm interested in the question, when you say things like,
And at the heart or the depth of this realm is the spiritual experience of the love of the Creator for each creature. You know, that the love of God is the thrilling experience of being known and cared for as an individual by the source of the universe is a thrilling confirmation of the faith of those who have a personal relationship with God, this creative being, which has, will and love.
This Creator God sees me, Jeff, and loves me, Jeff.
That's what the experience of the love of God confirms. That the beautiful, the true, and the good are each little flashing messages of love.
What is that like then if you don't feel the love of God? What if that's your personal experience? What if you're someone who's down and out, someone who's homeless, someone who's in horrible pain and suffering, and you don't feel God's love in any kind of real way in your life? And I guess in that case, God's message is coming in loud and clear. Isn't this kind of an insulting idea to them, that God loves you?
God's intervention is what's behind our idea that prayer works. But if God intervenes, why doesn't he? In our world, every 5 seconds, a child dies of starvation. Every 5 seconds. In our world, every minute, 25 people die from diseases from unclean water. Every hour, 300 people die of malaria. If God intervenes, why doesn't he intervene? The Holocaust, genocides, terrorist attacks, starvation, poverty, tsunamis, hurricanes, earthquakes.
Messages of love.
9 million children die every year before they reach the age of 5.
And that's, in a sense, our job, is to rediscover perfection experientially.
Okay, picture an Asian tsunami of the sort we saw in 2004 that killed 250,000 people. One of those every 10 days, killing children only under 5. Okay, it's 24,000 children a day, 1,000 an hour, 17 or so a minute. That means before I can get to the end of this sentence, some few children, very likely, will have died in terror and agony. Think of the parents of these children. Think of the fact that most of these men and women believe in God and are praying at this moment for their children to be spared. And their prayers will not be answered.
The love of the Creator for each creature. You know, that the love of God is the thrilling experience of being known and cared for as an individual by the source of the universe is a thrilling confirmation of the faith of those who have a personal relationship with God.
Okay, but this is all part of God's plan. Any God who would allow children by the millions to suffer and die in this way, and their parents to grieve in this way, either can do nothing to help them or doesn't care to. He is therefore either impotent or evil.
Messages of love.
This vision of life has absolutely nothing to do with moral accountability. Okay, and please notice the double standard that people use to exonerate God from all this evil. Okay, we're told that God is loving and kind and just and intrinsically good. But when someone like myself points out the rather obvious and compelling evidence that God is cruel and unjust because he visits suffering on innocent people of a scope and scale that would embarrass the most ambitious psychopath, okay, we're told that God is mysterious. Okay, who can understand God's will? Okay, and yet this is precisely, this merely human understanding of God's will is precisely what believers use to establish his goodness in the first place. You know, something good happens to a Christian. He feels some bliss while praying, say, or he sees some positive change in his life, and we're told that God is good. Okay, but when children by the tens of thousands are torn from their parents' arms and drowned, we're told that God is mysterious. Okay, this is how you play tennis without the net. Okay, and I want to suggest to you that it is not only tiresome when otherwise intelligent people speak this way, it is morally reprehensible. Okay, this kind of faith is really the perfection of narcissism. I mean, God loves me, don't you know? He cured me of my eczema. He makes me feel so good while singing in church. And just when we had given up hope, he found a banker who was willing to reduce my mother's mortgage. Okay, given all that this God of yours does not accomplish in the lives of others, given the misery that's being imposed on some helpless child at this instant, this kind of faith is obscene. Okay, to think in this way is to fail to reason honestly or to care sufficiently about the suffering of other human beings.
I'm just curious about that in general because I know Steve said that his God is a personal, loving God, maybe all-knowing, but all-powerful? Do we know? Does this fit into his whole free will kind of scheme? That's a common justification, though it's not one found in the Bible. I'd be interested to hear how he deals with that. If his God is all-powerful or if it intercedes in the world. It's an interesting question.
Infinity or perfection is partially withdrawn to create a space of freedom where we can participate in discovering what's relatively more perfect by our own volition. And that's, in a sense, our job, is to rediscover perfection experientially.
if we're really being honest, we can't postulate all of these idealistic assumptions and act like we know that that is true. We have to work from what we actually know, which I kind of feel like at a certain point that he's going to say this. He says something about, how we know that the Big Bang is true. And that's where I thought maybe he was going to get into talking about what I said about trying to work with what we got while we have it to make things more good for sentient beings who are suffering in the world, to measure good in a kind of way that's relative to the beings in question. Good for sentient beings, good for ecosystems, good for environments, good to relative ends. Good is a relative distinction. I don't know what perfection is in an absolute sense.
As I mentioned, they're also intrinsic in the sense that they're ends in themselves. They don't need to be good for anything else, although they certainly are.
And it also seems to be very human-centric.
If we want to know what evolution's purposes are, all we have to do is look within our direct experience. Our purposes are its purposes.
As if flesh monkeys are part of God's ultimate plan of realizing himself. I mean, talk about the height of arrogance. Now, this part really does remind me of arguing with a creationist. I feel like you almost need to bring out some bad design arguments or something.
I want to do just a fast tirade on stupid design. Look at all the things that just want to kill us. Most planet orbits are unstable. Star formation is completely inefficient. Most places in the universe will kill life instantly. There are people that say, oh, the forces of nature are just right for life. Excuse me. Just look at the volume of the universe where you can't live. You will die instantly. That's not what I call the Garden of Eden. Galaxy orbits that we orbit once every couple 100 million years, you're bound to come close to a supernova that will wipe out your ozone layer and kill everybody on the surface who doesn't otherwise have dark skin, because your high energy rays will give you skin cancer. We're on a collision course with the Andromeda Galaxy. Gone is this beautiful spiral that we have. And of course, we're on a one-way expanding universe as we wind down to oblivion, as the temperature of the universe asymptotically approaches absolute zero. That's the universe. Then Earth. Volcanoes, tsunami just killed up 200,000 people, floods, tornadoes. None of this is any sign that there's a benevolent anything out there. And 99% of all life that has ever lived is now extinct. Inner solar system is a shooting gallery, comets, asteroids, duck. And look how long it took to make multicellular life. From the beginning of the Earth. Life happened quickly, but not multicellular life. You needed your cyanobacteria to sort of crank on the oxygen. That's sort of rocket fuel for multicellular creatures. But that took 3.5 billion years. That's hardly an efficient plan with us in mind. And in human beings, this is like the most tragic of them. I don't even include here where people want to kill each other. I'm talking about nature killing us without the help of human beings. Aggressive childhood leukemia, hemophilia, all of this. And we so much praise about the human eye. But anyone who's seen the full breadth of the electromagnetic spectrum will recognize how blind we are. We can't detect magnetic fields, ionizing radiation, radon. We are like sitting ducks for ionizing radiation. We have to eat constantly because we're warm-blooded. Crocodile eat a chicken a month, it's fine. These gases at the bottom, you can't smell them, taste them, you breathe them in, you're dead. And with the birth defects, most are unknown. Others, it's like abuse and infection and stuff that human beings have something to do with. We have no idea. Birth defects are tragic. And you just look at images of these aborted fetuses, and most of these are stillborn. Others are born with a heart outside the body. This is all simply stupid design. And the problem is, if you look for what is intelligent, and yeah, you can find some things that are just really beautiful. And really, hey, that's a clever. You know, the ball socket of the shoulder. And a lot of things you can point to, but then you stop looking at all the things that confound that revelation. So if I came upon a frozen waterfall and it just struck me for all its beauty, I would then turn over the rock and try to find a millipede or some kind of deadly newt, and then put that in context and realize, of course, the universe is not here for us, for any singular purpose. Of course, you eat, breathe, eat, and drink through the same hole in your body, guaranteeing that some percent of us will choke to death every year. Imagine if you had a separate hole for breathing and eating and talking. It's not a hard request. Dolphins breathe and eat through different holes in their body. And this one, of course, my favorite of all, what's this going on between our legs? As you've heard, we have an entertainment complex in the middle of a sewage system. No engineer would design that at all.
What's the meaning of the universe? What's the meaning of a flea? It's just there. That's it. And your own meaning is that you're there. Now we are so engaged in doing things to achieve purposes of outer value that we forget that the inner value, the rapture that is associated with being alive is what it's all about. I don't believe life has a real purpose. I mean, when you really see what life is, it's a lot of protoplasm with an urge to reproduce and continue in being. Grass, you know. Every 2 weeks, a chap comes out with a lawnmower and cuts it down. Suppose the grass were to say, well, for Pete's sake, what's the use? It's the coming into being, that's it. And that's the life point in you. Just sheer life can't be said to have a purpose because look at all the different purposes it has all over the lot. But each incarnation, you might say, has a potentiality, and the function of life is to live that potentiality. Thinking about space may help you to realize something. The vision of a universe of unimaginable magnitude and inconceivable violence. Billions upon billions, literally, of roaring thermonuclear furnaces scattering from each other, each thermonuclear furnace being a star, and our sun among them. Many of them actually blowing themselves to pieces, littering the outermost reaches of space with dust and gas, out of which new stars with circling planets are being born right now. That's where we are, kiddo. And to realize that, you realize how really important you are. One little micro bit in this great magnitude. And then out of that must come the experience that you and that are in some sense one, and you partake of all of that.
Humans are freaking cool. We can create and manipulate symbols, and we've set ourselves up in these fancy little boxes, and we're living pretty well. But we're still just a species on this planet. We are not the end of evolution. We are having our time right now, but that time could pass. If we really understand what humans are in context, if we see that we are the earth, we are the universe becoming conscious in this vast mystery where it's not guaranteed, we might not survive. Humans might ruin it. We might not make it. And it's important to know that we might not make it, because if we think we're just going to make it, we're going to take it for granted. And we might not make it. We have to really step it up and do the things that we think are of value to be the hands and feet of evolution in this world to make shit happen. And if we don't make shit happen, we're going to die. You know, but then later in the talking to somebody else, he basically says this same thing.
Regress is always possible, right? And so if climate change tanks the environment and the economy with it, then civilization is clearly going to regress. And because these stages transcend and include each other, Integral requires the accomplishments of the previous stages being in place. So the emergence of the next great phase of human history is certainly contingent and not guaranteed. And so I'm not trying to describe it as inevitable. Cultural evolution doesn't occur inexorably like biological evolution. It occurs when people actually try to make the world a better place, right? It's not natural selection, it's actual selection. I definitely argue and believe that the universe is going somewhere, and where it's going is increasingly toward the infinite. In other words, there will be a completion of evolution. So I'm not trying to describe it as inevitable. There will be a completion of evolution, not inevitable. There will be not inevitable. There will be a completion of evolution, not inevitable.
It seems like he's saying that we as a species can fail to make it. We might not escape the heat death of the sun. Where are we going to go? What's our ultimate end that we're working towards? To me, it makes sense to say that the ultimate end that we're working towards is a better, always better, better tomorrow, always. We need some kind of an actual rational system to refine with emergent new information and technology. Here's another major problem. Only mention the idea of transrationality once, and it's not even qualified.
Look for spirit in ways that can be, transrational or pre-rational in some cases.
Alright, so let's talk real quick about what this word transrational is and is not referring to, because it seems like there's a lot of confusion around this topic. And basically, what a lot of the confusion is that people hear that word transrational and they think they know what it means based on other experiences that they've had and other knowledge they have about other traditions that they might be involved in. For example, some people hear that word transrational, like a transrational understanding, and they think it means psychic ability, like I know beyond rationality. I just have a transrational experience. Transrational knowing in that kind of way is not what the word transrational is talking about. Another confusion that sometimes happens is that people who are into Buddhism and state training or meditation, they hear the word transrational and they think that it relates to what they're doing in some of their meditative practices where they quiet the mind or they quiet the rational parts of the mind or the talking parts of the mind, and they have a transrational experience. And again, that's not what we're talking about. That's states of consciousness. Now, there is a confusion around this because horizontal development and peak experiences probably do correlate to a transrational stage of development. From a transrational perspective, one can have transpersonal experiences. But there's a lot of problems of translation because a lot of people can hear this kind of talk and think about it from the magical, mythical perspective still. So this is a point of confusion. But properly, what transrational is referring to is stages of development. So the rational stage of development. There are stages before that, magical and mythical stages, which are pre-rational. You have pre-rational interpretations of something that are magical and mythical. And then you have rational interpretations of something. Then you have transrational or post-formal. So there's another kind of distinction too that's similar. It's like conventional. You have your rational, modern, and your traditional stages, which are the more conventional stages. You have pre-conventional, impulsive egoics, and you have post-conventional or post-formal, postmodernist, integralists, so on. Basically, what we're talking about in terms of a transrational translation is a metaphorical translation. Now, a metaphor is not simply literal. It's not simply true or false. There's something deeper going on beyond what the symbols are referencing. And so this is the mind's ability to take into account more factors and to be able to see deeper and deeper truths. So we're talking about the beginning of becoming more and more ego construct aware, realizing the relative nature of language, and to some extent deconstructing the way that all symbols hide and reveal aspects of the truth, the different multiple entendres of possible interpretation. Not just simply, is this literally true or is this literally false? But now you can say, how is this true? How does this relate to my experience? What is this symbol saying in a deep way about what it is to be alive? And a metaphor makes sense. This kind of poetry that we're talking about, the interpretations of them do make sense. They are pointing to something that is there. It's not bullshit, and it's also not supernatural. It doesn't break the rules of rationality, the way that we understand the universe works. It's nothing magical or mythical. That's my point. The pre-rational stages tend to take myth literally. The rational stages tend to say that the myth is not literally true and they know that it's not fact, but they're both arguing whether it's true or not. And at the transrational stage, they will transcend and include both. They have found the synthesis, so they know that scientifically, rationally, it's not true, but poetically, metaphorically, in terms of the meaning that was supposed to be read into it, it is true. Take, for example, the tortoise and the hare. You don't ask, is the story true or not? If you think it's really about a tortoise and a hare, you've missed the point. It's about hard work and dedication, not a tortoise and a hare in a race or any of that. So that's a transrational, transliteral, post-formal approach to symbolism. And I want to make this distinction. It's not the experience itself that is pre-rational, rational, or trans-rational. It's the interpretation of the experience, the translation of the experience. Think back to the Wilber-Combs matrix that we showed earlier. For example, you can have an experience when you're young, and let's say you interpret that experience in a very traditional, magical, mythical way. Then you get a little bit older and you think back to that experience after maturing a little bit and kind of deconstructing your religion. You might interpret that same experience in a rational way. Then, let's say you get a little bit older, a little bit more mature still, you might think back on that same experience in a more trans-rational, poetic kind of way, where you can read in deeper meaning about how it affected your life. Same experience, one experience, but you can view that experience from all three different stages of development as you grow. So it's the translations that are pre-rational, rational, or trans-rational, not the experiences themselves. I've also made another video about what a trans-rational or post-formal perspective would look like, and I can't help but share a clip from it here now.
In the history of philosophy and poetry and art, we always find the interchange of two personality types, which I call Prickles and Goo. The prickly people are advocates of intellectual porcupinism. They want a rigor. They want precise statistics. And they have a certain clipped attitude in their voices. And you know this very well in academic circles, where there are people who are always edgy like that. And they accuse other people of being disgustingly vague and miasmic and mystical. But the vague, miasmic, and mystical people accuse the prickly people of being mere skeletons with no flesh on their bones. And they say to you, you just rattle. You're not really a human being. You know the words, but you don't know the music. But this natural universe is neither Prickles nor Goo exclusively. It's gooey Prickles and prickly Goo. And, you see, it all depends on your level of magnification. If you've got your magnification on something so that the focus is clear, you've got a prickly point of view. You've got structure, shape, clearly outlined, sharply defined. You look out of focus, it's going to go bleh, and you've got Goo. But we're always playing with the two.
Imagine you're in a movie theater, and you're watching Star Wars, let's say, with Prickles and Goo. So, Goo over here says something like, wow, this movie's amazing. I want to be a Jedi and use the Force. Prickles overhears this, and he is not happy. He says, you're stupid. You can't be a Jedi. That's dumb. This is just a movie. That's computer animation and green screens, actors and actresses playing scenes. It's not real at all. Luckily, there was no one in the theater, so I was able to say, well, hold on a minute now, there, Prickles and Goo. George Lucas, he put his real thoughts and ideas into this movie. Like, this is about the human drama. There's truth to be had in this. Okay, sure, it's green screens and computer graphics, but also, you know, maybe there is something to this metaphor of tapping into the one life force or the one energy of the cosmos that connects us all. You know, maybe metaphorically you could be a Jedi. And yeah, it's just a movie. This gets me into what we call the pre-trans fallacy. There are two versions of the pre-trans fallacy. The first version is what Prickles over here tries to do to Goo, where he says, you're just childish, you're just stupid. So that's one version of the fallacy, is to reduce anything that's non-rational to childish bullshit, like maybe Freud or Richard Dawkins or people like this might do. On the other hand, the second version of this kind of fallacy is a lot of these new agey people thinking that all of these symbols, all of this poetry is all God, even though it's all coming from a whole bunch of different cultures. It's totally embedded in old school traditions and antiquated cosmologies, and it's not relevant to the time we live in, and these different symbols are not actually compatible with each other. So those are your two versions. You have scientists who are totally literal, and you have religious people who are crazy and totally literal. So the difference between pre and trans is
Pre-rational translations are literal, magic and mythic. Transrational translations are metaphorical, even to the point of including what Nietzsche is talking about how we're using a bunch of metaphors to communicate. I'm going to go ahead and take this as an opportunity to read you one of my favorite Nietzsche quotes. He says, "What then is truth? A mobile army of metaphors, metonyms, and anthropomorphisms. In short, a sum of human relations which have been enhanced, transposed, and embellished poetically and rhetorically, and which after long use seem firm, canonical, and obligatory to a people. Truths are illusions about which one has forgotten that is what they are. Metaphors which are worn out and without sensuous power. Coins which have lost their picture and now matter only as metal, no longer as coins. We still do not know where the urge for truth comes from, for as of yet we have heard only of the obligation imposed by society that it should exist. To be truthful means using the customary metaphors. In moral terms, the obligation to lie according to fixed convention, to lie herd-like in a style obligatory for all." Friedrich Nietzsche. Think about what he's saying here. He's making a truth claim about truth claims. He's saying that we use a vast mobile army of metaphors, metonyms, and anthropomorphisms, a sum of human relations which have been enhanced, transposed, and embellished poetically. He's basically saying that we have all of these symbols that we trade around. And he said, after long use, they seem firm and canonical and obligatory to a people, that they're illusions. And he compares them to these coins which have lost their picture and now matter only as metal. He's saying that we've been trading around these symbols so much that we forget that they're printed and man-made, and we just think that they're this metal that's worth something. And we forget that it's a made-up game that we're playing. We still do not know where the urge for truth comes from, for as yet we have heard only of the obligation imposed by society that it should exist. So we're not exactly sure why we have to talk about things in this particular way, but it's always been the case. I guess because we've been indoctrinated into these ways, and we just take it for granted. So being truthful means using the customary metaphors in moral terms, because he's saying that the value is relative, it's agreed upon, so it's a moral should, it's a relative agreement. The obligation to lie, because we know that it's not the case, but we're going to play this game together according to fixed convention, and that we're all pushed into these ways of talking about things. That's a really interesting way of understanding truth. And when you do understand the relative nature of truth, this is the kind of truth claim that you'll probably be making about the way that most people think about truth. So this is the beginning of some kind of a post-formal or trans-rational kind of perspective where you can put the poetry in context. This is that middle position between the Eastern and Western perspectives where we can both understand the context of the symbol, understand the limits of it, understand the strengths of it, but also realize it's just a symbol, it's just poetry, and in a sense, it's illusory. So in that way, it is transcending and including these different types of truth, probably in the most healthy and inclusive way. So not just understanding the poetic value of religious symbols, but the poetic value of all symbols. You have pre-conventional ideas and post-conventional ideas. You know, like a baby doesn't understand language, and so it gets indoctrinated into all of these terms, and it takes them literally for granted. Whereas someone who has a post-formal understanding, like I'm talking about, like what Nietzsche had, they might use some of these same terms that, like we're talking, like he's using to deconstruct or reveal the nature of truth, but the translation is different. The baby takes the symbols as literally true. The rational mind can see the unfounded claims in the literal reading, and a transrational reading is metaphorical, seeing deeper truths beyond the symbol. And a lot of this, I think, relates to what is called vision logic. There's early vision logic, which relates to green. There's mid-vision logic, which is early integral stages. And then there's late-stage vision logic, which is your more teal, integrally informed second-tier stage. So early vision logic is like a lot of this poetry and this kind of a deeper read that happens within metaphor starting to come online. But there's still some pre-trans confusion, which is you can see the poetic deep beauty in mythology and different symbols and different traditions and what it's getting at and how it makes you feel, but you could still take some of the things that are associated with it, related to it literally, and get into some kind of confusion where you haven't really been able to figure out what makes it true or not yet. That's that second pre-trans fallacy that we mentioned earlier, pre-trans fallacy number 2, where Green tries to elevate things that are pre-rational as if they're trans-rational. And to some extent, they probably need to better integrate the rational or scientific perspective on those matters. Much the same way that's happening in this case with Steve. Then at the integral stage is where you're going to start to learn to make some of these distinctions. And it's like a more early kind of stage where you can actually make this trans-rational distinction. You can say, well, there's a difference between a metaphoric, symbolic use of that symbol and a literal, dogmatic use of that symbol. And then the integrally informed stage, this more spiral wizard, spiral technician, skillful practitioner in the world, is not just able to make these distinctions, but move around the world and navigate symbolically, skillfully, not just crafting a good symbol set and translation for themselves, but helping others where they're at. As integralists, we don't have a belief system. What we have are tools of discernment and communication. We have the cup and we have the sword. We have poetry. We have this feminine, flowing, nourishing kind of language that's deep and profound. We have the masculine, flaming sword that separates the passing from the eternal, that separates the truth from the bullshit, that cuts through. These are our two tools of discernment and communication. You have rationality, logic, scientific method, and you have poetry, beauty, things that resonate with people. So this is where it gets a little bit complicated, because from a trans-rational perspective, we realize the relative nature of language. We realize that even the sword is a type of poetry. Even when we speak poetically, the poetry can be qualified. The metaphor is talking about something. So there's an interchange here between these two, but we need to be able to hold them both in view. So for example, if you're talking about these symbols of transcendence and whatever, like, I can understand that in a way that is poetically beautiful, because I can figure out a way that your symbols might be true. Now, if that's not how you mean it, if you think that it's literally true, I can also pull out my sword and get in there and make some distinctions. Either way, whether we're speaking poetically or we're speaking rationally, we need to be able to qualify what we're saying, to qualify our poetry.
Joseph Campbell, probably the recent era's greatest mythologer and interpretive mythology, and somebody I certainly cut my teeth on. I was a great admirer of his and a really extraordinary work that he did. He used to very, very vehemently, actually, say that there's really sort of two types of mythology, or mythology forms two different functions. He wouldn't use the terms pre-rational and trans-rational, but the way we're talking about them is the way he would talk about these two functions of mythology. And the first function is when mythology is taken to be concretely real. But what some people do, particularly educated, intelligent people like us that are trying to get some meaning in our lives, we can tend to take myths as deeply symbolic of something else. Campbell knew this. As if, the capacity to form a cognition that says it's as if this is the case, or it would be, it's transrational. It can represent a deeper self, a higher self. It can represent oneness with all of reality. The Christ mythos itself is made to order for all sorts of interpretations. So that's a very, very distinguishing way to tell the difference between pre-rational myths that are taken to be concretely, literally true, and trans-rational myths that may represent some very high transpersonal dimensions. So as long as we take both of those into account, then we have the sort of more integral overview. And the problem, again, with the pre-trans fallacy is that people like Freud take every trans-rational, as if higher mythology and reduce it to two-year-old infantile nonsense. And on the other hand, way too many people take a lot of the pre-rational stuff and elevate it to trans-rational glory it just doesn't have.
From the outside, how do you know if this person's operating at a pre-rational or trans-rational level? Would it be if they were able to say, I'm going to act as if?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you ask them exactly what is it that you're doing. If they're making an empirical claim, check it empirically. On the other hand, it can be a very high kind of metaphoric, an as-if interpretive tool or Rorschach block.
So these stories of mythology are simply trying to express a truth that can't be grasp any other way?
It's the edge, the interface between what can be known and what is never to be discovered, because it is a mystery transcendent of all human research. The source of life. What is it? No one knows. Carl Jung's idea, which he calls the archetypes of the collective unconscious.
What do you mean by archetype?
They are expressions of the structure of the human psyche. All the gods, all the heavens, all the worlds are within us. They are magnified dreams. One can say that the images of myth are reflections of spiritual and depth potentialities of every one of us. From contemplating those, we evoke those powers in our own lives. And to see life as a poem and yourself participating in a poem is what the myth does for you. Every mythology, every religion is true in this sense. It is true as metaphorical of the human and cosmic mystery. But when it gets stuck to the metaphor, then you're in trouble.
The metaphor being?
Well, Jesus ascended to heaven. The story is he ascended bodily to heaven. So this is metaphorical of something. You don't have to throw it away. All you have to find is what it's saying.
What do you think it is saying?
What it's saying is he didn't go out there, he went in here, which is where you must go too, and ascend to heaven through the inward space to that source from which you and all life came. That's the sense of that.
But aren't you undermining one of the great cardinal doctrines of the traditional classic Christian faith, the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus?
That would be what I would call the mistaken reading of the symbol. That's reading it in terms of prose instead of in terms of poetry. That's reading a metaphor in terms of the denotation instead of in terms of the connotation. You understand that? It's a purely literary problem. Now, we want to think about God. God is a thought. God is a name. God is an idea. But its reference is to something that transcends all thinking. The ultimate mystery of being is beyond all categories of thought. The best things can't be told because they transcend thought. The second best are misunderstood because those are the thoughts that are supposed to refer to that which can't be thought about, and one gets stuck with the thoughts. The third best are what we talk about, you see. And a myth is that field of reference, metaphors referring to what is absolutely transcendent. I think it's important to live life with a knowledge of its mystery and of your own mystery. He who thinks he knows doesn't know. He who knows that he doesn't know, knows. The ultimate unqualified mystery is beyond human experience. It becomes inflected. As they say, there is a condescension on the part of the infinite to the mind of man, and that is what looks like God.
So whatever it is we experience, we have to express in language that is just not up to the occasion.
That's it. That's what poetry's for. Poetry is a language that has to be penetrated. It doesn't shut you off. It opens. It's the rhythm, the precise choice of words that will have implications and suggestions that go past the word is what has to happen. And then you get what Joyce calls the radiance, the epiphany. The epiphany is the showing through of the essence beyond names and forms. No tongue has soiled it. No word has reached it. Words are always qualifications and limitations. Our way of thinking in the West largely is that God is the source of the energy. The way in most Oriental thinking, and I think in most what we call primitive thinking also, is that God is a manifestation of the energy, not its source. I mean, for instance, when I was a little boy and was being brought up a Roman Catholic, I was told I had a guardian angel on my right side and a tempting devil on my left. When it came to making a decision of what I would do, the decision would depend on which one had most influence on me. And I must say that in my boyhood, and I think also in the people who were teaching me, they actually concretized those thoughts. That angel is a fact, and the devil is a fact, do you see? Otherwise, one thinks of them as metaphors for the energies that are afflicting and guiding you. This is why clowns are good, clown religions, because they showed that the image is not a fact, but it's a reflex of some kind, and yet they are the creator God at the same time. This makes the point, I am not the ultimate image, I am transparent to something through me, through my funny form, and mocking it, and you really get the sense, which if I had been a big sober presence, you get stuck with the image. But when you think everything's just that way, it comes in, it all blows, and you get the becoming thing again. Religion is a defense against a religious experience. It has reduced the whole thing to concepts and ideas, and having the concept and idea short circuits the transcendent experience, the experience of deep mystery is what one has to regard as the ultimate religious experience. The image of God becomes the final destruction. Your God is your ultimate barrier. And that's why it's a peak experience to break past all that every now and then, to realize, I think so.
There's also an important distinction to be made between how we speak on the inside of an integral worldview and how we speak on the outside to other people in terms of skillful means and whatnot. So on the inside, within our we space, we want to be able to speak all kinds of poetry to each other. We want to be able to speak about feeling called to do the will of God in time, and we want to be able to speak about Buddha nature or death to self or any of these kinds of poetic religious symbolism in a way where we all know what we're talking about. Those are valid ways of talking about our experience. It's poetically valid. Not only is it poetically valid, we are narrative-driven creatures. That's what we do. We tell stories. And so some of the deepest, most profound things that we can talk about relates back to mythology. And so we don't want to throw out mythology. We want to understand it in context and be able to use it skillfully. But we also want to be able to qualify within our group that we're speaking poetically to each other and be able to back up the poetry if someone asks about it. Being able to make this kind of distinction is a key feature of being integrally informed. And then skillful means on the outside looks like being multilingual and being able to translate and speak to a bunch of different people where they're at. Christians, Buddhists, and not just Christians and Buddhists, but traditional Christians and Buddhists, modern rational Christians and Buddhists, green, pluralistic, postmodern Christians and Buddhists, and be able to speak their language at the different stages, to be able to speak to a rational person in their own terminology, to be able to speak to a Christian at their stage of development in their own terminology. We need to be able to understand this poetry to help people with healthy translation. And that's why Michael Dowd is such a great example of this. So let's look at what someone like a Michael Dowd says. And you can see how he gives such a good demonstration of transrationality, how to understand these ideas poetically and metaphorically, and he can qualify it as such, and his ability to use this in a way where he can translate to Christians in the world and get them to be more concerned with climate change and to take more of the quadrants into consideration to have a more healthy translation where they're at. We really need integralists out there who are doing this kind of work. So the cup, the sword, how to be integral on the inside, how to be integral on the outside. These are things I think Michael Dowd demonstrates well, and important distinctions that I'm trying to make. So here's a clip I made from a recent interview from Buddha at the Gas Pump, where Michael Dowd is explaining his perspective. And I invite you to watch the full interview right here.
Now, I personally am rather passionate about what I call the path of factual faith or sacred realism. I'm a religious naturalist. I have no supernatural or otherworldly beliefs. We are in the largest transformation of religious sensibility in perhaps human history, a second axial age. I call it the evidential reformation, where all the religions of the world are coming to realize that there is no future for humanity or for their faith if we don't come into right relationship to reality. I sometimes say reality is my God, evidence is my scripture, and ecology is my theology. And said another way, any understanding of God that doesn't include what we today mean by the word reality isn't God. Reality is Lord. That's not a belief, that's a fact. That is, everything submits to and is accountable to what today we would call reality. What's real, whether you believe in it or not. And whether you call that God or the goddess or the universe or cosmos or whatever, Buddha nature, we are all part of that, what I call divine reality. We have to learn from nature as if nature is the voice of God, and if nature's laws are God's laws, and we either need to abide by those laws or we suffer the consequences. We will create the hell for ourselves and our children. And any understanding of scripture that doesn't include evidence is not God's word. Evidence is the main way reality is revealing truth to us today. Not only the evidence of our own experience, but also scientific, historic, and cross-cultural evidence. So that can't be, that needs to be lifted up at the realm of divine revelation or God's word or scripture. One of the things that God, reality, has been revealing through evidence, through evolutionary psychology and evolutionary brain science, among other places, is that we have self-deceptive instincts. And that's why we need the collective. Scientists are just as prone to self-deception as anybody else, but the community of scientists, where there's motivation, where there's incentive to prove each other wrong, is usually a good thing in the long run in terms of helping our theories and our understandings of reality come into a closer alignment with the way reality really is. We now know, again, we don't believe this, we know this, that our brains are inherently relational. We can't not relate. Our brains are instinctually programmed to relate, and we typically relate through human categories. So we throughout human history, we've treated the river or the soil or the oceans or whatever in a personified way, and all gods and goddesses are personifications, not persons. If I think of God, or any god or goddess throughout human history, as a separate non-material entity floating around somewhere, okay, then I'm going to miss the power of the personification. I'm going to miss the inescapable reality. Like I say, Helios is inescapably real. Poseidon is inescapably real. Gaia is inescapably real. You don't have to personify those realities, but the realities that they point to are inescapably real. And that's why I love the fact that Hollywood has just gotten with the program in a major way. Anybody watching or listening to this, just put natureisspeaking.com. And there's these videos that have now been done. Julia Roberts, for example, speaks as Mother Nature.
I've been here for over 4.5 billion years. 22,500 times longer than you. I don't really need people, but people need me.
She doesn't speak about nature. She's nature giving voice. Harrison Ford speaks as the oceans.
I am the ocean. I'm water. I'm most of this planet. I shaped it. Every stream, every cloud, and every raindrop, it all comes back to me.
You could say that's the voice of Poseidon today. And I mean, these are kick butt. I mean, some of these videos have had millions of views. They've gone viral because they tap into the power of personification. And so for me, God is a personification of reality. I put it this way: God is reality with a personality, not a person outside reality. So for me, God is inescapably, undeniably real, or the goddess, whatever you want to call it. But for us, the word God is like a name, a proper name, a sacred name for reality as a whole. And the only way of salvation, again, using mythic language, but the only way of salvation is to come back into right relationship to reality. And that's the path of integrity. So for me, Christ is not a supernatural person floating around somewhere. Christ is the incarnation or embodiment or personification, a personification of integrity. You may think there's some path to right relationship to reality that bysteps integrity. You're deceived. There's no way. And so Satan is not some disembodied spook. Satan is a personification of everything that would lead us or could lead us to be out of right relationship to reality, everything that would lead us to be anti-future, personified. So from that vantage point, Satan and Christ are inescapably real. They're not supernatural beings. They're personifications of that which would have us destroy the future, or that which would have us save or help or be a blessing to the future. Our metaphors matter. The analogies and metaphors that we use for reality matter. They shape our attention and put our consciousness in a certain track that can be either life-giving and pro-future or life-damaging and anti-future. And our concepts of God can do the same thing. In fact, I think that it's not secular people are attacking some of the new atheists and secular folk are often attacking religion, saying religion's the problem because they even have a God concept. Well, I suggest that's missing the point too. The word God can either be thought of as pointing to some supernatural entity who lives off the planet and outside the universe, who blesses some and smites others. That's a trivial, impotent, inconsequential God. Or the word God can be understood from a science-based way. The one science-based way of understanding of God is that all God talk, all gods and goddesses are personifications, that is giving human characteristics to something that's inescapably real. I mean, Poseidon wasn't the god of the oceans. Poseidon wasn't the spirit of the oceans. Poseidon was a personification of the incomprehensibly powerful and capricious seas. Gaia was a personification of Earth, not the goddess of the Earth or not the spirit of the Earth. Helios was not the god of the sun, but a personification of this inescapably real reality that gives us life. So the word God, if the word God is not personifying inescapable reality, then it's a trivial God that actually, if we think that we can worship God and trash the environment or treat others in an unjust way, we're out of touch with reality. So our concepts of God matter. But God is now thought of as a being outside a clockwork universe that you can either believe in, theism, or disbelieve. Atheism. Could you imagine how bizarre it would be if you're walking into a room and you hear two people debating whether or not Uncle Sam is real, or whether or not Uncle Sam exists? Your first thought was they don't get it. Uncle Sam is a personification of the government. Of course the government's real, but of course it's not literal. And so you got this debate, thousands or maybe millions of people that are debating whether or not God exists or whether or not God is real, when the one real God, namely reality, personified or not, we've been out of right relationship to. So our views of God seriously matter. If all the people in your life who use God talk use it in a way of a supernatural being who is on the side of this group of people and condemning this group of people, then an atheist is simply somebody who says, I don't believe in that being. But most atheists and most secular people that I know of that are really into the science, they don't see it as billiard balls. They see this emergentist perspective. We have Michael Shermer is a friend of mine, the head of Skeptic Magazine. Connie's known Richard Dawkins for decades. I mean, these are people who don't have a mechanistic worldview. They're emergentists. That is, they see it's not either determined, God preordained it and put it all together, or chance. It's creative. We have a creative reality, a creative cosmos, an emergence. That greater complexity keeps emerging out of lesser complexity. So I just feel a little awkward because I don't want to be dissing people saying that they believe this and how could they be so dumb and stupid, because that's really not what they believe anyway. It's reality, it's holy, it's sacred, it's whatever, but they don't attribute some supernatural intelligence to the one that created it. They see the whole thing as divine. I mean, some of them wouldn't use the word divine, but they see the whole thing as worthy of our deepest respect and honor and commitment. And so, frankly, this isn't necessarily a direction I'm that interested in because we don't have time to convert each other over the issues of theology or metaphysics. We need to redesign our economic systems globally, which is going to take a level of cooperation across ethnic, religious, political differences in the service of a healthy future. Otherwise, we are literally condemning our children and grandchildren to hell and high water. So my focus lately, the last 2.5 years, have been really big on climate change. I'm tending these days to focus a lot less on theology and metaphysics and a lot more on, okay, we don't agree on that? No problem. Let's set that aside. What can we agree on so that we can work together to ensure a healthy future? That's sort of the bottom line for me these days.
All right, so let's compare these gentlemen. Steve believes in an anthropocentric God. Michael Dowd is into the personification. Steve is into the literal translation. Michael Dowd is into the metaphorical. Steve's ideas are pre-rational. Michael Dowd's translation is trans-rational. Steve is trying to sell pre-rational ideas as if they're trans-rational, and Michael Dowd is trying to sell trans-rational ideas to the pre-rational. Steve is an idealist, dualist when it comes to metaphysics, and Michael Dowd is an emergentist realist. Steve believes in perfection and transcendence and puts his stake in otherworldly ideas of Telos, and Michael Dowd believes in better and this-worldly progress. Steve McIntosh is advocating for his belief system, and Michael Dowd is interested in evidence and poetry. Steve backs up his ideas based on his own personal experience, and Michael Dowd is interested in peer review and skepticism. Over here you have unfounded claims. Over here you have integrity. Over here you have a human-centric perspective. Over here you have a world-centric, cosmocentric perspective. Over here you have literal theology masquerading as integral. Over here you have an example of a demonstration of trans-rational distinctions and skillfulness. This is what it's supposed to look like. This is how to do it. This is how not to do it. And that's the issue I take. These are the distinctions that I think are important. That's what I think it means to have an integral perspective. That's what it means to integrate diversity with discernment. And that's what it means to have a spiritual worldview and practice that resonates with science and rationality.
I, Kermit the Frog, will make the momentous leap to second tier. Steady yourselves. 1, 2, 3. Oh my goodness, it worked! Oh no, I seem to have regressed. Good grief. I guess it was too magical. Well,
And from the Upanishad, then he realized, I indeed am this creation, for I have poured it forth from myself. In that way, he became this creation, and verily, he who knows this becomes in this creation a creator. When you know this, then you've identified with the creative principle yourself, which is the God power in the world, which means in you. It's beautiful. I see that I am this creation, says the God. Or when you see that God says he is the creation and then you are a creature, well, the God is within you and the man you're talking to also. And so there's that realization, two aspects of the one divinity.
Accord again, harmony again.
Wonderful thing. Now, according to the normal way of thinking about the Christian religion, we cannot identify with Jesus. We have to imitate Jesus, but to say, I am God, as Jesus said, is for us blasphemy. However, in the Thomas Gospel, Jesus says, he who drinks from my mouth will become as I am, and I shall be he. Wow, that's Buddhism. We are all manifestations of Buddha consciousness, only don't know it. And the Buddha, the word means the one who waked up, or to wake, woke up to the fact that he was Buddha consciousness. And we are all to do that. To wake up to our Jesus within us. This is blasphemy in the normal way of thinking in Christianity, but it's the very essence of Gnosticism and of the Thomas Gospel. In India, this wonderful Anjali, this greeting, you know what that means? That's the greeting of prayer, isn't it? That's what we use for prayer. They greet you with that. That's greeting the God that's in you as you come in. These people are aware of the divine presence. When you enter an Indian home as a guest, you are a visiting deity, and you feel it, by God, the way they treat you. It's something in the way of a hospitality that you don't get where you have simply one person and another person. It's a recognition. So I look at you now in that sense, and the radiance of the presence of the divine is known to me through you.
Through me?
You, sure.
A journalist?
Jesus also says in this text, he who drinks from my mouth will become as I am, and I shall be he. He's talking from the point of view of that being of beings, which we call the Christ, who is the being of all of us. And anyone who lives in relation to that is as Christ.
So that's what you mean when you say, I am radiating God to you?
You are, yes.
And you to me?
And I'm speaking this seriously. So you are the vehicle. You are, as it were, radiant of the Spirit. Why not recognize it?
Like even me now, this is God speaking to you to let you know what's up. Are you going to hear this message? God from a limited perspective, but God nonetheless putting in hard time to deliver you this message.
Now, if you're clinging to your ego and its little world and hanging on, and the deity wants to open you, the wrathful aspect comes. It seems to you terrible. But if you are open, and open enough, then that same deity would be experienced as bliss.
Think about Martin Buber, I and thou. This idea of God in first, second, and third person, God in all four quadrants, is a way of getting us to think about how the whole world around us is sacred and how to see life as a sacred process that we participate in, and to see all the different aspects and appreciate them. How I'm sacred, how I can be a manifestation of the absolute in a relative context. And so can everyone else. How we're all a part of the body of Christ, if you will. And in that way, I feel like taking God literally and worshiping God as your second person, not seeing God in your brother, your sister, your daughter, your son, your mother, your father, your friend, your dog, your cat, the food you eat, the environment. Any of these things is neglecting God. It's worshiping a figment of your imagination, while in a real sense, you're not really giving the credit where it's due. When you have a good day, it's not because God blessed you, it's because people around you may have been nice to you. So this also leads to this other problem of if heaven or nirvana is this psychological position where you see yourself as one with all that's arising, unity, atonement, or at-one-ment, and hell or samsara is being lost in separateness, then to see the afterlife as heaven is to miss heaven of right now. So not only are we missing the second person, the actual second person, are you giving credit where credit is due? Are you experiencing oneness, unity, heaven, nirvana, or are you waiting for some time after you're dead to try to experience it? If that's what you're doing, I'm sorry, man, you're missing it. This is it. Okay, so just to sum up and recap, Steve believes in a pre-rational interpretation of mythology. He believes in a literal God and has admittedly unfounded woo-woo belief system. Almost enough said. There's nothing transrational about that. There's also a problem with integrity because he's acting like he knows this stuff from the beginning and trying to sell his belief system as if that's what integral evolutionary spirituality is. But when he's called on it, he admits that it's not. And this belief is problematic because it has us believing in otherworldly things, bypassing real-world stuff that we should be appreciating and not taking for granted. It's also offensive because it's not taking into account the tons of other people out there who are suffering and their experience and how they might feel about this kind of a belief system. It's also dangerous because he's advocating for bad methodology, bad integration. His epistemology is not really integral. he's looking in the wrong quadrant for data, and his justification for validating his worldview would also validate any other worldview. So, again, bad integration, far-sighted mish-mashing, false attempts at consensus, green, pluralistic, postmodern, pseudoscientific, bad theology masquerading as integral evolutionary spirituality.
But how does one worship a metaphor, love a metaphor, die for a metaphor?
Well, that's what people are doing all over the place. That's what people are doing all over the place. Dying for metaphors.
What does that do to faith?
Well, it's a tough one about faith.
You are a man of faith.
I don't have to have faith. I have experience.
What kind of experience?
I had a very amusing experience, which it might be well worth telling. I was in the New York Athletic Club swimming pool, and I was introduced to a priest. This is Father so-and-so. This is Joseph Campbell. And he said, "Mr. Campbell, are you a priest?" I said, "No, Father." He said, "Are you a Catholic?" I said, "I was, Father." He said, and now he had the sense to ask it this way, "Do you believe in a personal God?" I said, "No, Father." And he said, "Well, I suppose there is no way to prove by logic the existence of a personal God." And I said, "If there were, Father, what would be the value of faith?" "Well, Mr. Campbell, it's nice to have met you," and he was off. I really felt I'd done a jiu-jitsu trick. "Do you believe in a personal God?" Why do you have to say that? Why can't it be impersonal? That would be the transcendent mystery that you can also personify.
The presence of the infinite.
Unfortunately, there are many leaders in the integral community who also suffer from a lot of these same kind of pre-trans confusions, and their integration is not necessarily skillful. It's bias to whatever particular tradition they tend to prefer. So for example, in the same way that Steve McIntosh prefers his kind of Christian God, Ken Wilber prefers kind of an Eastern I amness before the Big Bang type of idealism. And I'm definitely not the only one who thinks this. I recently sent Don Beck a message asking him what he thought about Ken Wilber's integration of Aurobindo's third-tier stages of development, because Don Beck is the champion of spiral dynamics, and I was interested to hear what he thought about these additional stages stacked on top of his spiral dynamic stages. And he said, "I reject all of this. Ken Wilber's assumption that mystics represent the highest stages of development and the integration of Aurobindo's third-tier stages. It's yet another example of Wilber's attempt to exploit the Graves model in spiral dynamics. He lacks entirely the seventh code of integral, and has no idea how, when, where each of the codes have emerged. I will gladly challenge him to a public debate, but he still hides out in his loft in Denver. The whole idea of tiers is uniquely language from our work, which he steals in order to market his. The man lacks any ethical basis when he does so. He is nothing beyond red-orange. If he wants to develop his own systems, then he should do so without exploiting my lifetime of work, which he continues to do. Our seventh and now emerging eighth code, second tier, are functional, resolve real-world problems, and emerge out of life conditions, not out of some mystical realm from Eastern viewpoints which belong to those cultures, not Western societies. The eighth code is beginning to take shape. It will not be the sixth code, green, on steroids, as many in the integral world believe." Don Beck. Wow. So clearly, Don Beck has a bone to pick with Ken Wilber about some of these same religious biases and green on steroids that I'm talking about. That's what I mean about these issues with Steve being a major problem that's spread throughout our integral community. And integral theory itself is dualistic, assuming that quadrants go all the way down, the tetra arising of the quadrants, when really we should only be talking about the tetra arising of the quadrants and sentient holons, or sentient beings. So we agree on the basic integral factors of AQAL, all quadrants, all levels, all lines, all states, all types. but we disagree about some of the data within some of the different quadrants, and we come to different conclusions. Even though I often think when Ken Wilber is making these mistakes, he should know better based on his own integral theory. I think he breaks his own rules. I haven't done a full deconstruction of Wilber where I think he's right and where I think he's wrong yet. But I think based on the distinctions that we're making here, you can see a lot of the same patterns and the problems across a lot of these leaders. And for now, you can check out this video that I made, and you can listen to Ken Wilber talk about idealism in his Eastern dogmatic kind of a way. So as you can see, Jeff Salzman has drank some of this Kool-Aid, and he probably couldn't make a pre-trans distinction to save his life, even though he does talk about it on his show. When he does talk about it, it kind of reveals his lack of ability to make these distinctions in a hard and fast kind of way, in the way that I've demonstrated in this video. So I intend to make a video about him too. I'm not exactly sure how I want to do it yet, because he has so much material. I think I might have to collect the greatest hits from all of his daily Evolver shows and just go through kind of one by one and talk about all the crazy misunderstandings and confusion that's in there. So that's coming. It seems that Terry Patten has drank some of this Kool-Aid. Check out what Terry Patten recently said when he spoke at a Urantria meeting.
Urantria's philosophy is something I would call integral. It's integrating truth, beauty, goodness, matter, mind, spirit, and a lot of other things. And as you may know, there's a movement called the Integral Movement, which is doing the very same thing. And to me, it's in parallel with the Urantia movement.
What I'm hearing and appreciating is that there's something truly inspiring in this space. An evolution beyond metaphysics, an evolution into something truly universal. And the Urantria book is an expression of that. Integral theory is an expression of that. My attitude is that there's something going on that's bigger than our names for it and our interpretive structures for it. There's a marriage of rationality, not the kind of science that's being practiced commonly by scientistic fundamentalists, certainly, but a rational clarity and a spiritually inspired understanding that is coming together in a synthesis. We could call it non-dual, but it's incarnationally non-dual. We could call it spiritually fragrant and alive, pulled by value. We could call it panentheist, that is, everything is God. There is only God, and yet God is more than anything. So there really is another kind of mysticism that we're awakening to that is the most personal. And what I'm appreciating in my work right now, in which I'm expanding integral life practice into what I'm calling integral soul work, is a resonance with what I'm feeling in the Urantria book around this soul dimension, and I wanted to express that. Now, that's the thing I really wanted to say from the heart, but the inspired aliveness of this this wonderful quality of the Urantria book, that it is both non-dual and that it is entirely theistic at the same time. There's a spiritual fragrance in that, and an inspired heart in that I hope will bring something to the integral community too.
And I'm hoping that these two different communities can get a greater interaction and rapport, and I'm sure it will happen.
Integral is being conflated with Urantria here. And maybe you don't know what Urantria is, but it's basically some kind of way out there Christian cult that combines reincarnation and space aliens and Jesus. And the text of the Urantria comes to us through channels, through mediums. Is this what you want associated with integral? Is this skillful outreach and integration? I don't think so. To hear more about that, you can check this video here. But there are probably other leaders too, and we should talk about them. And I would invite you to make blogs, to make videos like this, to make these distinctions, and to hold our integral leaders accountable for what they say and what they do in public. You know I'll be making more videos. There are definitely some of these other people that I want to talk about what they've said and examine them a bit more critically. So if you can think of somebody who's talking a whole bunch of BS and you don't feel capable of doing a blog or a video about it, send me an email right here and send me a video and a link, and I'll check it out and see what I can do about it. So what's happening is there's actually starting to be a split in the integral community along the lines of some of these paradoxes like idealism or a more rational, realist, emergentist understanding, or translation within the system that we have in a more transformative approach. Recently, we've started a group that is intending on making some of these distinctions, and if you resonate with the distinctions I've made in this video, I would ask you to join. Alright, so very recently, I posted in all the integral groups on Facebook. I said, there has been a split in our integral community brewing for a very long time. There is a ton of media about it. Many people have talked about wanting to break away. Many others have stopped associating, identifying with our community or the word integral altogether. I personally think it's time to make the split, explicitly challenge the current issues, and bring integrity to integral so it can really be a healthy and positive expression of integral in the world. If you resonate with the following points, please join in the founding of our movement and get involved here. And then I posted a link to our Integral Emergentist Revolutionary Movement, which I'll also put a link for below. So this is a summary of the key differences between Integral the brand, as I'm calling it, and the Integral Emergentist Revolutionary Movement. So number 1, no creationism or spirit underlying everything or inherent telos to the cosmos, no afterlife, perfection, or transcendence. We do not believe in mythic, supernatural ideas about where we came from and where we are going. We say yes to life, this world, this reality. We see suffering and impermanence as things that make life worth living. They help us to appreciate what we have and motivate us to make things better. Life is not an illusion or a dream. Reality is real, and we have a healthy relationship to it. Number 2, consciousness is an emergent quality of matter, not the source of it. Idealism and dualism are antiquated cosmologies. This is an emergentist perspective, and it cannot be reduced to mere empiricism or upper right reductionism. No tetra arising all the way back, only in sentient beings. Chemistry is not love. That is anthropocentric projection, acting like inanimate objects have human feelings. And pseudoscience, working backwards from what you would like to be true and trying to find ways to make the world fit into religious mythic preconceptions about it. Number 3, pre-trans distinctions, the cup, poetry, and the sword, rationality, understanding the relative nature of all language. We can speak poetically within our community using any and all symbol sets, and we can qualify our poetry in terms of something real. We can also use the power of these distinctions as translations down the spiral to speak the language of other traditions or worldviews from within other traditions and move them towards goodness and truth with skillful means. 4, epistemological skillfulness and humility, not making claims and assertions we can't back up with good reasons and evidence. We're talking about responsible leadership and understanding the quadratic validation process. Number 5, including becoming, creating, and self-mastery, not just self-transcendence and states. Post-formal integral religion, the 4 S's of spiritual practice. Reality is real and we have a healthy relationship to it. Our ultimate goals are not personal, spiritual enlightenment, freedom, and transcendence, but a better world in the here and now for us all. And I say that because it's somewhat already assumed that we have had some kind of an existential awakening or enlightenment happen in green, and by the time we get to be teal or turquoise, now we're trying to apply that in the world. So that awakening is not an end in itself, but is the beginning of awakening to a much bigger project and process. Number 6, movement, lifestyle versus products, events. Skillful leadership, organization, integration, and outreach. Affordable and available events for all economic classes. This is a major problem right now in the community. The events are so expensive, it's crazy. Encouraging, connecting, expanding, refining, and participating in the integral movement culture. 7, embracing debates and disagreements towards what's actually true and good. Creative friction and tension help us grow and refine. This is one of the basics of integral governance, is embracing friction. Number 8, new transformational governance, education, religious, and social systems, etc. Not just translations. Selective, individualist, integral synthesis. Move the hierarchy from the economic sphere to the public sphere. Move the society more to the middle and focus on individual needs growth as an investment in the future so individuals can bring their skills to the project of humanity. Integral, emergent, transparent, interactive governance system.
These are some of the things we're thinking about and working on. We're not just trying to cause a split or talk trash, we're actually trying to lead by example and get some stuff done, which is what we feel the current leadership is not doing.
Thanks so much for watching. That was a really long one. It took me a very long time to make. I hope you liked it. I hope to add more to this channel. Subscribe. Also go check out my other channels. I am David Long, Philosopher King, Philosophical Conversations with Kevin and David, and so on. Thanks again. Peace!